Okay, a very good morning to all connected with us, and we are hoping for that some more people will be connecting us shortly. Due to less time, we'll be starting our session. Okay, we have a little foggy morning here in Punjab, and I hope you are all are having a wonderful morning. Myself, Gulgul Singh, host for the 11th day of this 15-day international training cum workshop program on Agriculture 2.0 as next level approach towards sustainability, smart farming, and agri-innovation. I feel obliged to welcome my dear dignitaries, esteemed personalities, and nevertheless our dearest participants. This program has been organized jointly by Just Agriculture Magazine and Agro Environmental Education and Farmers Welfare Society. The magazine has a readership of more than 1.05 lakh in India, which makes it a credible platform for researchers, students, and scientists to share their ideas on the latest innovative topics. AEEFWS Society, on the other hand, aims to enhance livelihood opportunities for more than 1 million farm households in the country. Today, we have with us a distinguished personality. I feel honored to welcome Joanna Kane Potoko, Executive Director and founder of Food 2030. Ma'am, on behalf of Just Agriculture team, we welcome you. Please spare me a minute to introduce our guest present here. Joanna began her career as an agriculture economist and later moved into market research in agribusiness area. Since then, she has worked in the wide variety of other marketing related areas, including strategic marketing, communications, business development, knowledge management, and uptake of scientific research. She has worked for government, private industry, and with non-profit organizations, including 4 CGIAR agriculture research centers. Specialized in dry land agriculture, water, biodiversity, and fisheries. As part of this, she has lived and worked in India, Sri Lanka, Italy, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Australia. She founded the global initiative Smart Food, which was selected in 2017 by United States Agency for International Development and Australian government as one of the winning top 10 global food innovations. Smart food is defined as the food that is good for humans, the planet, and farmers. With onsetting a new venture recently, Food 2030, which is to create a global community of agents to drive demand changes needed in the food system. Food 2030 will advocate and act to drive demand along the whole value chain for consumers to farmers for a smarter food system that will help us to reach the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of 2030. As we all present here are connected to the major priority of food and proper nutrition, let us gather some knowledge about integrating nutrition into agriculture. Ma'am, we will be honored to hear from you. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Gulgul, and thanks for the opportunity and welcome everybody. Gulgul, you can start the PowerPoint anytime or whoever's driving it. So I'll talk about integrating nutrition into agriculture, and there are many different angles to doing this. So I will present only some today, but what I'll do is I'll talk very broadly, first of all, about, right, so we can go to the next slide, about the what's been happening globally over the last few decades in regards to the whole food system. So basically in the 50s and 60s, particularly in India, you saw that the whole focus was on food security. It was about just having enough food to eat for survival. And that, of course, was what stimulated the Green Revolution. Post the Green Revolution, there became a lot more awareness about nutrition. So it's about what they called hidden hunger. So it wasn't just about people being hungry, but the hidden hunger was about what nutritional value was people eating. And then more recently, the UN started talking about sustainable diets, diets that are sustainable on the environment. And so what we say is the next stage is putting all that together and going a step further, that all our solutions should be good for the consumer, so nutritious and healthy, good for the planet, so environmentally sustainable, and good for the farmer. How do you ensure it? And this is a triple bottom line. Just like companies have a triple bottom line, it's not just profit, they also look at people, society, and profits. So this is a triple bottom line, especially designed for the agriculture and foods system, that any solution we put forward, we should be thinking about its nutritional value, its environmental sustainability, and how it's sustainable for the farmer as well. So if you can go to the next slide, you'll see what's happened over time is we've created what's called a food system divide, where basically for decades, especially since that Green Revolution, we've had the vast majority of investments in the big three: rice, wheat, and maize. So whether it be government support, whether it be private industry investment, product development, even the development aid, the vast majority go into the big three. So in the next slide, you'll see, for example, that the big three deliver more than 50% of calories consumed globally. And so that's huge, just 3 crops producing 50% of what people consume from a calorie perspective. And if you look at the next slide, so 45% of private sector agricultural research investment goes into just 1 crop. So nearly half of everything globally goes into just 1 crop. And if you click that again, you'll see that that's maize. Now, if you see on the next slide, just an example of what's been happening, also another example where if you look at the change in relative contribution of crops to the diet by calorie intake over the last 50 years, the 3 biggest increases are oils, wheat, and rice. The 3 biggest decreases are sorghum, cassava, and millets. Now, if you look in the next slide, we can look at specifically India. If you look from the 1960 to almost 2020, you'll see the red line at the top, how rice has tripled in its production. Wheat has increased 800%. Now maize is starting to take off and it's increased 500%. And you'll see there some of the traditional staples like millet and the sorghum there, where they've stayed reasonably stable and hardly any growth compared to massive growth of the big three. Now you could say, if you go to the next slide, you could say, well, does this really matter? Does it matter that we have this dominance of the big three in our agriculture, and it is reflected in what we consume? So if you go to the next slide, you'll see possibly, arguably, the 2 biggest issues we have globally at the moment is climate change and health and nutrition. So if you look at climate change, we've had projected declines in yields due to climate change by 2050. And if you see that rice and wheat, that orange and green bar, have the biggest potential decreases in yields impacted because of climate change. And when they're already dominating the food and agriculture system, then that's going to be a massive effect on agriculture. And of course, health and nutrition, we still have huge malnutrition issues. We have obesity increasing, and we have so many health issues like diabetes and cardiovascular disease, which is increasing significantly globally and in India. So if you go to the next slide, it means that we really do urgently need solutions that will cope with climate change. We have the water shortages, we have soil degradation, we have the malnutrition, and we have many of the diet-based health issues. And so we do need more diversity on farm. We do need more climate smart, resilient agriculture. We do need more diversity in diets, and we do need healthier diets. Now, we can only achieve this when we're looking at our whole agricultural system, if we have that triple bottom line in mind when we're designing solutions, and really to have the biggest impact on the nutrition and the environmental issues we've got to deal with, then we need to, and you can click again, we need to diversify staples, because these staples that we've been talking about, the big three, they typically are 70% of the plate nearly every meal. So if we can tackle the nutrition and the climate change and the other issues we have to deal with through our staples, that's how we can have a big impact and quicker. So, and if you click, so if we go from the big three and we diversify, go to the big five, eventually the big seven, etc., then we really can have big impact. But we can't do this with just any food. We have to do it with food that's going to fulfill that triple bottom line that we talked about. So it's got to be smarter foods. And we need to have a supply push where we're integrating and thinking about nutrition and sustainability when we decide the agriculture that we're going to be growing. But we also, at the same time, need to have a demand pull. So how are we driving the demands for these smarter foods? Because we can't grow food that's more nutritious or more sustainable if the demand isn't there as well. So we can't separate agriculture from the food industry, from the consumers. We have to design solutions that then are working from both ends. Now, I'm going to go in and give an example, because what you see in the slide here are a number of the different types of millets typically grown in India. Now, if we are to diversify staples, then we can only do that if we focus on a couple of crops at one point in time, because to bring something back as a staple, you have to have well-developed value chains. You have to be able to compete. You have to be in that commodity market. You have to have the supplies available. You have to have it accessible, etc. And you can't do that all at once with many different foods. So it was looked at a number of years ago. If we were to diversify the staples, then it would make sense that millets, which includes sorghum, millets are the one to focus on. It's a smarter food. It's good for you, the planet, the farmer. It's resilient. It was the traditional staple, and there are many other reasons. So millets are one way to bring in nutrition into agriculture, and it actually brings in the sustainability element as well. It is good for the farmer too, in that it's more resilient to climate change, it's a lower risk, etc. However, it's not always good for the farmer if we can't drive the demand side as well, because it's also got to be profitable and viable for the farmers. So this was an example of where I said we have to look at supply and demand together in unison to drive solutions. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see just a little bit more detail about millets. So millets can grow with minimal fertilizers and pesticides. So that has given them a lower carbon footprint, also means a lower cost of inputs for the farmers. Now they grow with much less water. So they, it's about an eighth of the amount of water needed for example, rice. They also survive in much hotter, drier climates. And with climate change, we know temperatures are going to go up. They're often described as the last crop standing in times of drought. Now, because also they haven't had the same amount of investment as the big three, there is greater potential to increase their yield, whereas some of the other major crops have come closer to a yield plateau. And then also with the millets, there's some multiple uses. They are a human food. They're also extremely important for feed and fodder. They're used in brewing, and the sweet sorghum that's used as a biofuel. So all these multiple uses help make them a more viable industry. Now, because the talk today is more on the nutrition side, I'm going to go into a little more detail on the nutrition, because I've been part of a team of a number of organizations globally that came together, and we've, over the last 4 years, been studying any scientific backing behind the biggest nutrition claims for millets. And these have all been released this year, and the last one is about to be released. So if you look at the next slide, I'll just go through. Now, diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Diabetes is increasing dramatically worldwide. India is currently number 2 in the world for the number of people with diabetes. And if you look here, 55% of men in India and 65% of women are expected by the age of 20 to have developed diabetes. That's very, very large. And if you look globally, 2.2 million deaths from diabetes and high blood sugar level every year. So it's absolutely massive. So if you look on the next slide, so what we did is we did a study, we did a series of systematic reviews and meta-analyses. Now, what this means is we looked at, collected and studied all the studies that had ever been done on the impact of millet on type 2 diabetes. And we used their data and reanalyzed across all the studies. So on the next slide, you'll see the results showed that the average millets on average have a low glycemic index, and they reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So for diabetic individuals that were studied, the blood glucose level was lowered by 12%, and between 12 and 15%, and many other impacts there. So, and this was comparing it to the other typical staples. So if we diversified the staples, then we could potentially significantly decrease the risk of diabetes. So if you look at the next slide, we also looked at cardiovascular disease. This is one of the biggest causes of death globally. Very big for women also in India, but men and women. And we also looked at obesity. And in India, 30 million people are obese, and the number is climbing. So in the next slide, you'll see the analysis that we did. And if we go, we'll go quickly on to the next slide, the results. So what we found is that consuming millets, on the next slide, you'll see it, it did decrease cholesterol, and it also decreased BMI. So it decreased, yeah, there we are, we have it now. It also decreased obesity. So it showed that consuming millets could, compared to the typical staples, could reduce the risk of developing cardiovascular disease. And if you see some of the statistics there, it reduced total cholesterol by 80%. It decreased what's considered the bad cholesterols and slightly increased what's considered the good cholesterols. It lowered blood pressure, and it reduced the BMI. So hugely important with this being a risk right now. If you look on the next slide, we also studied the impacts of consuming millets compared to some of the other staples too, but the impacts on anemia, and particularly anemia that may be impacted by iron. So in India, of course, there was a very recent latest study that came out that showed that anemia was increasing. More than 50% of women of reproductive age are anemic, which is absolutely huge. And it's an issue globally as well. So if you look on the next slide, we did the systematic review of meta-analysis, and there were 26 studies out there. 15 of those on humans. And if you go to the next slide, where we looked at the results. So consuming millets did reduce anemia. So many millets are very, very high in iron. And we also studied the bioavailability of that iron. So that means how much of that iron your body actually absorbs. And so we found that there was good bioavailability. We tested different, in the studies, there were different types of processed millets, and they were looked at. And most of the processing methods can actually increase the bioavailability, meaning you can actually absorb more of the iron. And actually, millets can provide all or most of your daily physiological iron requirements for the average person, because their iron is significantly higher than meat. Now, meat-based micronutrients or iron are absorbed less than plant-based iron. However, the iron was so high in the millets, you can actually receive as much iron from millet as you can from meat. But what we have to be very, very careful of here is that iron levels vary significantly by variety. Now, this is where agriculture in particular plays an even greater role, because just by selecting the right variety, you can triple, you can even quadruple the amount of iron somebody will get from that millet just by selecting the right variety. And the challenge that we have here in agriculture and in food is that the farmer cannot see the nutrition level, the consumer cannot see the nutrition level. So somewhere along the way, we have to work out a better way for branding and labeling, and for people, and the awareness of people to understand that right from seed level, we can impact significantly on nutrition if we make the right decisions at the right time. Okay, so we go to the next slide. So some other points about it. So the finger millet, or the ragi, has 3 times the amount of calcium as milk. That's absolutely massive. And we've looked at the bioavailability, and it's almost the same level of bioavailability for finger millet as it is for milk, meaning that you really will absorb 3 times the amount of calcium from finger millet as the equivalent of milk. We have an upcoming study on looking at the impact of consuming millets on growth, which is a reflection of also overcoming malnutrition. And it showed strongly and significantly that millets, compared to the other typical staples, can improve the growth of children. So very, very important. So then if also millets can have high dietary fiber. Now, another part here, and this is an example where we really shouldn't be separating agriculture from the food industry, because you can do everything right in choosing the right variety, in producing the best crop, and then if the processing then ruins all the nutrition that was grown in the field, you've just destroyed being able to bring nutritious food to the plate. And I guess an example here is with rice. Whole grain rice is reasonably nutritious. As soon as you refine it and you have white, polished rice, you've lost so much of the nutrition. Now, millets have a risk of going in that direction too, and so do other grains and foods. So sorry, if we can still go back to the other slide, yes. So how we integrate agriculture and the food system and how we ensure the nutrition is kept throughout is really important. And there's a lot of FPOs and farmer producer companies now that are also, and women's groups that are also setting up processing plants to value add at the farm gate side. Now, and so the farmers now have then more opportunity to influence the nutrition level of the product. Now, the next point there also, millets have a good level of protein. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. Good antioxidants, and they're gluten-free. So they hit also some of the other markets that are out there. On the next slide, I'll just talk about the protein level. So in India especially, where legumes are an important protein source, what a lot of consumers and other people don't realize is the legumes typically don't have all the essential amino acids, which are very important to have a complete protein. However, the amino acids that the legumes are short in, the millets have 50% more of that. So when you combine millets and legumes, you get a complete protein and you get all the extra micronutrients. So the combination of the legumes and protein is actually very, very powerful. And very important in a country like India. So I'll just talk here. Actually, I'm near the end of my slides, and so there'll be time for questions, I hope. But I'll just come over. Actually, I've just got 8 points. I took a couple of, but there's some 8 key points for incorporating nutrition into agriculture. So the first point there is it's about having what I talked about at the beginning, these smarter foods, triple bottom line approach. So in looking at your agricultural system and your decisions and solutions that are brought in, every one of those solutions thinking through, is it going to be good for the consumer? Is it environmentally sustainable? And how is it good for the farmer as well? So the second point then is about diversifying staples. Now, there are many different ways to bring in better nutrition in agriculture and in food, but if we do it through diversifying staples, that's how we can have a very big impact because of the quantity, the large amount of our agriculture and our food that is dependent on the staples. Then the next point, it's about selecting by varieties, selecting the nutrition by varieties. So an organization called Harvest Plus, part of the CGIAR, did some studies a number of years ago to prove that you can increase the micronutrient levels while still keeping the yields. So it's called biofortified varieties, and are there for higher nutrient levels, but can still have the good yield levels and all the other characteristics that you need. So selecting by variety to improve nutrition is extremely important. And a lot of farmers, if they're also eating the food that they grow and also sell, then they're bringing more nutrition to their families as well. So being aware and knowing and searching out which varieties have the higher micronutrient levels, particularly for example, millets, looking at that high iron and zinc level is really, really important and can make a huge difference. Okay, the next point is it's about having that whole grain. Like I mentioned before, if we don't ensure that post-farm gate, we keep the nutrition level, it will have been fruitless, all the efforts made at the farm level. So how can we ensure that, and in this case, the millets was the example used, how do we ensure the millets stay whole grain? So it's very important because it's a high risk that millets can go down the route that white refined rice went down, because polishing it can make it quicker to cook, and that's an important characteristic. But once people have the taste and they're used to a particular type of millet, if it was to be highly polished, it's very hard to go back. Whereas if we're at the early enough stage in the growth of the millet industry to be able to ensure they stay whole grain. Okay, the next point. Okay, so processing methods and cooking methods. Interestingly, and with the millets, but it's not the case with all the foods, we actually can increase the nutritional value you can receive by the different processing methods. So we've looked at even fermentation, extrusion, sprouting, a variety of different methods can actually add nutritional value. However, what we have to be careful of is that foods are not ultra processed and the actual ingredients that are added to it are healthy ingredients. Otherwise, the good ingredients, again, becomes fruitless if it's ultra processed or other poor ingredients added. Okay, the next point is food combinations. So I haven't talked about this, but a lot of farmers will be, and rural communities will be eating what they grow. Now, I think this food combinations is something that's going to become bigger in the future. There's a little less commonly known about it now. In the scientific world, it's well known, but you can significantly increase the bioavailability or the micronutrients that you absorb in your body just by the food combinations. So, for example, if you have vitamin C in your food, which might come from the limes, you can significantly increase the iron that you absorb from the millet or the meats or any other foods that you're eating. In calcium, now there's in India, calcium is absorbed if you have good levels of vitamin D. Now in India, there's very high vitamin D deficiency, which often a lot of it comes from the sunshine. So if we're not having the vitamin D, then we're not absorbing the calcium from the grain. So understanding those food combinations is going to be very, very important in the future to reach the needs that are there, the anemia, the malnutrition, etc., will have to be solved understanding the food combinations as well. And so that diversity on farm and in the diet is critical part of that. So the next point there's only 2 to go. It's about, now this is from the policy side, but everybody must play a part in getting the policies that are needed. It's going to be very difficult to diversify the staples if we don't have a level playing field and the incentives for smarter foods. At the moment, the policies support the traditional rice and wheat. Well, they're not traditional, but well, they were, but so were other foods as well. But they've been left behind, and there isn't a level playing field. Of course, Government of India is now strongly supporting millets, and there are changes happening in whether or not millets can enter with a minimum support price in the public distribution system, in foods introduced into ANGANWADIs and also into the school feeding program. There's a little way to go, but there is a great movement now happening. And then the last point is one of the points I also made earlier. It's about how we drive the demand from the consumer end as well. Farmers will plant what is most financially viable for them as well. And so we've got to drive the demand side for healthier foods and foods that are more sustainable as well for the farmer, and are going to be able to be there and survive with climate change. So this is about building consumer awareness and driving the demand for something that they actually want. This has to be, how do we excite the consumer about some of these other foods which are truly exciting, and there's great potential there. So there's some of the points around incorporating nutrition into agriculture. It's not, as you can see from all of that, it's not something so simple to do, and it requires a lot of different people along the value chain, including the government, supporting this. So I think can be time for questions if that's allowed, but yeah, so Gulgul, back to you.
Yes, ma'am, just a minute. Yeah, it was really very enlightening talk, ma'am. Thank you so much for giving us such a knowledge about this, as we are all in agriculture sector and allied sectors. So we know the sustainable goals are important for us at this moment. We have a lot of questions coming from participants. So let's start with some question and answering session. First of all, somebody has asked us that how to minimize the impact of climate change on agriculture. What are your views, ma'am?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, if I can just use millets as an example just for the moment, it's not the only solution. The one advantage of millets is it's both a mitigation and adaptation solution, and farmers need both. Adaptation means that because it's highly resilient, that it's going to help farmers cope with climate change. It will decrease the risk versus other crops. But it's also mitigating because it has that lower carbon footprint. So certainly by the type of crop, but also this is about diversifying on farm. Farmers can significantly increase their adaptation to climate change with more diversity on farm. That's going to be extremely important. It makes it, it can make it more complex because they've got more crops to deal with, and they could be integrating animal agriculture as well, but it's absolutely important to diversify to cope with climate change. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. There's many questions here regarding that we apply pesticides excessively in agriculture. There are high amount of pesticides which are produced for increasing the higher returns. So that presence of that residue is gonna affect or threaten the human health, and the risk is there. So how can we minimize it? Like, how can a millet can help? Is that growth of millet does not require that much of pesticides? What you can tell about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Millet can survive with fewer pesticides and fertilizers. Now that doesn't mean it doesn't need any. But some of those other crops, like the maize and the rice and a lot of vegetables, etc., require huge amounts of pesticides and fertilizers to survive and to do well. So yes, a millets will mean fewer of those. Then it's still got to be how we apply them and what's applied. Certainly also integrating other types of agriculture. So if you're integrating livestock, the use of manure, vermicomposting, there's many other ways to integrate into that to minimize the amount of the pesticides or the fertilizers used, and then how they're applied. The awareness of equipment used and when applied, the methods that they're applied are also extremely important. Yeah.
Sorry for the disturbance. I request participants please to mute yourselves. I think this is Komal Sharma. Can you please mute yourself? Miss Komal Sharma, please can you mute yourself? It's a little disturbing here. I'm sorry, I think they are not into this. So let's carry on with the next question. You have told about the diversification of crops, like the three, from the big three to the big five and to the big seven. So, but I have a question that Indian farmers, should they focus on diversification, or the real question right now, the MSP? What are your views? Like, they go for that practice and now rather than the diversification?
Right. I'm not sure those two are one versus the other. I actually think both are important. I do think diversification is important for the environmental sustainability, for coping with climate change, looking after the soils better, and so on, decreasing risk. And now the minimum support price, not everything is going to have a minimum support price. Definitely, and this is where staples are particularly important, because staples are the ones that are going to have a minimum support price. And absolutely, we have to diversify the staples. And the farmers need that need that minimum support price to give the incentive to diversify the staples. So they sort of come together, actually, and especially when you're talking staples. So, I mean, luckily the government is talking about bringing in minimum support price for millets, and it's happened in different areas in different ways. But, you know, we have to also drive the demand so that that also works as well. And of course, we all know that minimum support price doesn't, it's one part of the whole complexity. It doesn't mean always that there's a whole system it works within. It's quite complex, but we have to drive the demand. And that's one good thing that the government is trying to do now as well, is they are trying to drive the demand for millets. There's more support for entrepreneurs and startup companies and having better product, more convenient and exciting and modern products available and tasty products available with the millets. The government's looking at how they can run campaigns around the awareness and promotion of the millets. And so that's also important. Otherwise, even the minimum support price, then there isn't the demand driving at the other side.
Definitely. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a little, we want to distinguish between the mixed crop, growing a mixed crop in a section, and growing the crop diversification. Can you just slightly tell our participants what's the difference in that?
Yeah, so actually you can diversify in different ways. You're right, you can intercrop at one point in time, or you can have just different crops for different seasons. And then you can integrate with the whole livestock side as well, even with fisheries and aquaculture ponds integrated. And that's integrating actually using resources from one part of the agricultural system into the other part, like the manure used as a fertilizer, etc. So there are different ways to integrate and diversify. So it's a good question, and actually probably I'm saying it's all of that, and there's different combinations. I think what's really important, I talked before about how there's the risk that millets can also end up polished and processed and lacking nutrition if we are not careful. The same with monocropping. I mean, this is one good thing that India has, that there's less monocropping versus, say, countries like the US and Australia. However, we still have to be careful, because it's the monocropping that really destroys the soils and puts farmers at bigger risk. They do it because there's the immediate returns now, and that's why we have to make sure the solution includes how does it benefit the farmer, because the farmer is still a business and they have to make money in the same way everybody wants to earn from whatever hard work they do.
Definitely. Ma'am, I have two questions now. Your answer has led me to two questions. First is the nutrition part. We'll go to the nutrition part. You told that millets provide nutrition in the place of like iron, zinc, and calcium. You stated one line that was literally personal to myself. I'm from a fishery sectors back, basically I'm from an aquaculture sector. So you told that iron solubility in meat is little less as compared to plants. Which particular meat you're talking about? Is it pork or lamb or fishes? Can you elaborate it, please, ma'am?
Right. Okay. So it's meat in general, because there's what's called heme iron and non-heme iron. And the iron that comes from any meat has that higher bioavailability versus any plant-based iron. So not even any particular plant, but plant-based iron. And so, yeah, but so if plants have iron, so meats will have higher absorption of the iron. But it just so happens that millets, and there'll be other foods as well, but foods like millets that have extremely high levels of iron, much, much higher than meat. So even when you look at a lower percentage being absorbed, they still end up with more iron than meat. Of course, fish is super nutritious and has great iron. It has other advantages too, with the omega-3 oils, and yeah, meat. Actually, if you had, fish is probably one of, as long as it's safe, it comes from a safe source, and what it's lived in, and it hasn't had the antibiotics or anything like that, then fish is one of the very big superfoods.
Yeah. Ma'am, continuing to the nutrition part, there's also the section you talked about that there is more than 50% of females in reproductive age that they're anemic. The iron is not present in them. Though we are saying that millets have the solubility of having the iron, does mostly if I'm in a journal, I'm talking about if a pregnant lady, they goes to their doctor for their normal checkup, they give us the tablets, the iron tablets. Mostly they provide the synthetic dose of iron for the females. That is basically what I feel is the absorption level of that iron that reacts fast. Now, if we provide millets in their diet, will that absorption really affecting them first? What is the change in the difference? How we can promote them from going to the tablet to the actual diet?
Okay, that's a really, really good question. Okay, so typically supplements like tablets or even fortified food, you're right, they're synthetics, but they're often very important for an urgent situation. When someone's got really acute malnutrition or anemia, they're in a very difficult position and you want something quick and immediate, they're extremely important. Long term, they're not the solution we should be looking at, and they are synthetic. So now if you eat millets, you will get an immediate effect of that, the absorption of that iron. So there is a good immediate effect. But you have to ensure that then they're immediately having the millet and continuing to eat it. The supplement should be used in an urgent situation.
Yes.
But the diet should be what's used long term, and that's what we should really be concentrating on doing. We did a study. We did the very first school-based study on introducing millets into the school feeding program, and we had 2 schools with 1,500 students where we worked with Akshya Patra to design and bring in millet-based meals. And then we had another 1,500 students from 2 other schools that continued to be fed the iron-fortified rice-based meals. And then we tested the children's growth over that time. We chose adolescence, which is a growth phase. So what we found is the children fed the millet-based meals grew 50% more than the children fed the fortified rice-based meals. Plus, we did sensory evaluations. So every month, we had a survey and we asked the children how much they were liking the millet-based meals, because just as important that they actually enjoy it and like it. And every millet-based meal got 4.5 out of 5 or higher. So it was very, very high because we worked closely with the chefs at Akshapatra. We designed it so it was nice and delicious and culturally suited that region of India. But, you know, it's really hard. Now, you're up in Punjab as well, most of the people here, I think, where rice is also important in the diet. So ask people, you know, would you integrate millet? Would you have 50% rice, 50% millet? Because some of the millets you can cook, especially the minor millets, you can cook it just like rice. But you can have it so many other ways as well. In the smoothie drinks, porridge, and
Variety of
soup.
foods.
Yeah.
Variety of foods.
So we have to get people excited about it and experimenting with it and using it and seeing it as something fun and new to use, not just something old to use.
Yes, ma'am. Going back to one of our question regarding diversification, one of us, Mr. Satyajit, has asked a really very good question. He has told that suppose if the whole India stops producing rice and wheat and we start cultivating millets, then there will be a possibility of really a food scarcity. I think that like that happened in Sri Lanka, that recently a sudden shifting to organic farming. So what are your suggestion of implementing the millet farming that it doesn't give us the food scarcity situation in India?
Look, I think there's two big points there in that question. One is whether something's done suddenly, and two is if you're going right from one extreme to the other. This is not about not having rice and wheat. It's about diversifying. Diversifying is not one versus the other. It's about needing all of it. You need it all in your agriculture system and you need it all in your diet. And by diversifying, it gives the farmers more options, more resilience, lowers the risk. So definitely it should never be one versus the other. The only thing I would do different with rice is how could you bring back the interest in whole grain rice? Now, without any doubt at all, white, refined, polished rice is damaging the nutrition and health of people in a grave way. Now, the advantage of wheat is super, super healthy and nutritious. But of course, when it's refined, when you've got that 𝑚aida, it's not good. So wheat, we have to continue to encourage people to use whole grain, which is very nutritious. Rice, we need to move back to whole grain rice. Even then, millets and whole grain wheat, in general, it still depends on variety, but in general are much, much more nutritious. But still, whole grain rice will be hugely valuable if we can bring that back. And then if you had all those three in diversity, it would be a brilliant diet and it would be very helpful agriculturally.
Yeah, definitely, ma'am, definitely. Now, many questions are arising, the economically importance, the economically structure of millets. Like if farmers are shifting from like rice or diversifying their yield and going to millet, can you just give us an outlook about the economic version now? What is the price? How it is best price? Or it is like fruitful for the farmers? Should they shift from rice to others? Can you just help us, enlighten us with this?
Yeah. Okay. Some of this is going to be dependent on the government of India bringing that level playing field. It is very difficult for farmers when there's a minimum support price for one crop and not another. One is in the public distribution system, the other isn't, and so on. So it definitely needs more push, and the farmers, everybody needs to play a part. I mean, the government of India are already discussing this, so we're ahead. We're moving ahead in that direction, and changes will happen. So it's a good time for farmers to watch what the government's doing, talk with their local government and the state governments as well to ensure that their states are moving in this same direction so that farmers have the right incentives. Yeah. And that's why I've always said, farmers are a business. It has to be viable. We shouldn't just be pushing to farmers, you should grow this because it's more nutritious or because it's better for the environment, because the incentives have to be right for the farmers as well. And the government has a major responsibility there too.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, please continue.
Oh, okay. But in the meantime, it doesn't mean it isn't viable. It is viable. It's who and how and where and what you bring in and the combinations and linking with the right market. So there is viability there, but we need to have a better level playing field.
Okay. Somebody just now has poked one question in my chat box that, is it true that high millets consumption lead to stones in kidney due to their long time digestion? Is there any study about it, or is it really true?
Okay. Absolute complete myth. Oh. Definitely not. Now millets can be high in fiber, which is a big positive, and it can mean that it's absorbed slower into it's digested slower, which is positive because it means you're not getting spikes in sugar, and that's why it's got the low glycemic index and it's better for diabetes, and it keeps you fuller for longer. But that doesn't mean it's hard to digest. It's good that it's digesting slower. It means that you process differently when you're giving babies millets. They're very good for babies, but you process it differently and you give them different foods than what we would eat. No, but it's eating different types of millets and eating it regularly is absolutely excellent for your health.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. And some of the important questions are this only, like it's most of our related questions. Somebody has asked that with this biofortification, what is there like on a global scenario, as it's a boom right now, biofortification. We see in every sector. We see biofortified crops, we see biofortified fishes, like we see biofortified everywhere. But what is a global scenario? Will that be like, is it a little different from the genetically modified organisms or the GM crops which talking about, where they'll have a harmful effect like the GM crops? Can you just help us?
All right, good question to clarify that. So biofortified really means that it's got higher nutrition level compared to the other varieties. Now, you can reach that through different means. You can reach it, first of all, the easiest would be just by selecting the varieties that are naturally higher in nutrients. They're naturally biofortified. Another method you can do it, which a lot of people are doing and has become the trend, is through the breeding program. Instead of breeding only for yield or resilience or pest resilience, etc., you also select by nutrient as well as those other criteria. So that's breeding, a conventional breeding. Then you can also go that way through GMO as well. You could then do genetically modified and select the genes and cross, etc., the ones with the higher nutrients. So it can come about through any of your different forms of producing varieties or hybrids. But it just means the biofortified just means it's high in the nutrients. It's a particularly high variety with high nutrients. Yeah. So then you have to be careful how it came about. Some are there purely naturally and they're just selected that way. Yeah.
So definitely, so the biofortification has a really very potential in the future coming, like as we are going to attain, let's say, the sustainable development goals, the biofortified crops and everything, they are going to help us to attain those goals. But the real million-dollar question is how we are going to help people to accept it. As we see, people are a little hesitant to for a change. I see in my locality or in my people that people are actually hesitant. How can we promote the marketing of these things? How can we promote this to help people? Just can you help some people from our participants have asked, what is the market important? Your question, the key point was also there, that how, if we promote it in a very good way, it'll be helpful. So can you just help me how we can promote people to eat these nutritious foods?
Right. So do you mean they're hesitant to have millets, or did you mean hesitant for biofortified
For
foods?
everything, for a change. Like
Everything.
I'm asking change.
For change. Yeah. Okay. All right. No, that's a very good question. And it has to be that we have to drive it from the demand side, but make it exciting, that people do want it. It's not a case of forcing food. It's not a case of saying, this is healthy, therefore you should eat it. Absolutely not. But the advantage of, for example, millets, and this is only an example, is that there's been a huge increase in the last 7 years of processors and entrepreneurs and startup companies moving into millets. And the amount of different products that they've created, from millet pancake mixes to smoothie mixes to all sorts of things, they're really creating a buzz around millets and making it exciting. Still promoting that they're healthy, but doing it in a way that makes you want to try it and eat it. So the approach is extremely important. So creating the tasty products, making it convenient. We're all busy. We all want convenient foods, but keeping them healthy. And just getting people excited about it. We did a consumer survey about millets. So it was very large. It was 15,500 face-to-face interviews across 7 cities in India. And so what we found is that you could group people into 3 very broad groups for consuming millets. First of all, the group that was eating, that like the biggest reason why people said they ate millets was the people who said, I have a health problem. The people, for example, with diabetes, and they were looking for solutions. Then we found the next group were people who they're health and fitness conscious, but we found that a lot of them had very low awareness about the nutrition and health value of millets. So there's great potential to just increase awareness about it to get more consumption.
Yeah.
But then reaching the mass market is the next big challenge. And what we found is the largest reason why people said they either did not eat millets or they didn't eat more millets was because it was not eaten at home. So if you could influence the person who's having the biggest impact on what's eaten at home, then you could have a multiplier effect of people eating millets. And certainly the way people ate it were much more sort of inconvenient forms as well. So there's methods to do it, definitely. And there's a movement there already. It's happening. And of course, most people probably know by now that 2023 will be the UN International Year of Millets. So we're expecting that to be the real tipping point to the huge global attention around millets and the excitement and buzz that we hope to drive around that.
Thank you, Joanna, so much for such an informative talk today. Sorry, there are loads of questions coming, but it's more of related. But we have a second guest have already joined, and it was really very enlightening to have you here. And on the behalf of the whole team, I feel honored and obliged to thank you for appreciating some time. And please, we'll be touched. Thank you for joining Just Agriculture and such an innovative talk. Thank you so much, Joanna.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Great questions. Thank you too.
Thank you, Joanna. It's for now. We'll be moving to our next session, and just a minute from taking me a breath. I'll be continuously talking. Okay, so here here is for the people, the participants who have joined just now for a new. We welcome you all for the 11th day of the 15 this workshop, international workshop, which is aiming for the agriculture 2.0, that is sustainability, sustainability, smart farming, and agri innovation. Myself, Bulbul Singh, I'll introduce myself again for this next session. Now we are having again a very distinguished personality with us to talk here. I would like to welcome on the behalf of Just Agriculture magazine and the society, Mr. Dr. Vijay Singh. He's a soil chemist and by training, and one of the 10 national professors of the Indian Council of Agricultural Research during 2006 to 2012. Dr. Vijay Singh is presently working as INSA Honorary Scientist at Punjab Agriculture University, Ludhiana. He served as a senior soil chemist from 1994 to 2006. Sorry, sir, it's like it was before an year I was born. And as INSA Senior Scientist from 2012 to 2017. So as to sustain high yield levels of rice and wheat without adversely affecting the soil health in Punjab, also as the granary of India. We know that Dr. Vijay Singh has been working on different aspects of fertilizer management for more than 3 decades. His contribution on nitrogen balance in the soil plant system have led to a better understanding for basically, first, the enhancing nitrogen use efficiency in rice wheat cropping system. Second, fertilizer nitrogen related environmental pollution, and not the least, integrated nutrient management. His work on site specific and need-based application of nitrogen fertilizers to rice, wheat using leaf color chart, chlorophyll meter, and optical sensors should greatly economize fertilizer nitrogen usage. His research efforts on the basic and applied aspects of the integrated management of fertilizers and animals, manures, green manures, and crop residues have provided scientifically sound directions for achieving not only sustainable yields in the rice wheat system, but also maintaining soil fertility for the future generation. Let's not talk about, I've already told what he has 350 publications, including 150 research papers in journals of national and international repute, 40 reviews, of which 7 are in advances in agronomy, and 50 plus book chapters. Dr. Singh's research on different aspects of fertilizer management, crop nutrition, environmental issues related to fertilizers has been published in high impact factor journals and publications authored by him have 7,600 plus citation index. Come on, guys. H index of 41 and I-10 index of 90. Sir, we are obliged to have you, as he is a fellow of Indian National Science Academy, National Academy of Agriculture Science, and Indian Society of Soil Sciences. He has been decorated with several awards, including the 𝘉𝐵 Memorial Prize of Indian Council of Agriculture Research, the most prestigious award in agriculture sciences in India. The Fertilizer Association of India has honored him with its Silver Jubilee Award 2 times in 1984 and 2001. National Academy of Agriculture Science honored him with the Recognition Award in 2000 and Dr. N.S. Randhawa Memorial Award in 2008. So as the list goes on, so we let's hear from Sir presently here. We are so obliged to have you, sir, with us. On to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Gul Singh. Well, your name is very nice. I have heard this for the first time. Anyway, you have taken I think more than 10 minutes of the time slot allotted to me. Anyway, I will not be taxing you too much. Whatever things you have spoken about me, they are fine. But today I have decided to talk on a very different issue. Because nowadays, a lot of politicians, even common man, they are worried about that the fertilizers, particularly nitrogen, like urea, which we are applying in large amounts for increasing the yield of rice and wheat, they are adversely affecting soil health. So I thought that the best topic for today's discussion is that let's examine whether nitrogen fertilizer use, the urea which we are applying in large amounts, is really adversely affecting soil health, or it's only a notion. So without wasting any time, I would like to share my screen if I can do that. Yes. Can I make it full size? Yeah. I think you can see the slides.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are able to see that.
Okay. So my talk is about soil health. So I would like to start with what soil is and what are the things which make it healthy. Well, soil is a very complex, multi-component and multifunctional system with, I think the first slide should be, yeah, that's the better one. We must first of all understand that everything that lives on the earth depends upon the soil. And 99.7% of human food comes from the soil. something like 78% comes directly from the soil, and some 20% which comes in an indirect way, like we have milk, animal meat and other things. They also indirectly come, they get nutrition from the soil, and then we get this food. So almost all the food which we are getting, which we are eating, is coming from the soil. And then we must also keep it in mind that we have a very limited supply of soils. There's a total of 13 billion hectares of land on the earth. Of that, only 11% is under crops. About 27% is under pastures, 32% under forests, and 21%, which is remaining 21%, we cannot put under crops, pastures, or forests. So we have only 11% of the total land available on the earth which can be used for growing crops, or which has soil. So that means that to supply enough food for the growing population, which is already more than 7.5 billion, we need to conserve and protect our soils. And we need to ensure that the soils remain healthy. I'll talk about what healthy soils are later. Yeah, soils are not very simple things. They are very complex, multi-component and multifunctional systems with definable operating limits. And properties of the soils, they change by all kinds of interventions which we are making. Like we till our soils, there's a drainage, we irrigate our soils, and we apply plant nutrients. All these things, all the things we do, all the things which we do to grow more food crops or cereal crops or anything else, they alter the properties of soils. And the main driver for all these alterations or interventions, particularly over the past century, is because of quadrupling of world population, which demanded a fundamental change in soil and crop management in order to produce more food. We are already more than 7.5 billion, and in the last 50 years, we have almost doubled. With the present rate of 1.3% per year increased rate of population, the population will again double in next 50 years. And in India, particularly, we have a rate of 1.7% per year. That means that we will double in just 41 years. So that indicates how much pressure will be on the soils and how much, and we will be changing those soils, changing the properties of soils to produce more and more food. And in that process, perhaps we will be adversely affecting soil health. As I indicated, there are a couple of things which we are doing, like tillage, drainage, irrigation, and addition of plant nutrients, because today I'm talking about fertilizers. So I'll be talking more about how application of nutrients through fertilizers is going to change soil properties or soil health. Well, what is soil health? In simple words, it is how well the soil does what it is supposed to do. So we use soil to produce crops, to produce food. So if the soil is not able to do the job as it should, then it means it's not healthy. But soil health is an integrative property reflecting the capacity of soil to respond to agricultural interventions. Interventions I have already listed, like tillage. Tillage is the most important intervention, because since we have entered into settled agriculture, we have been tilling our soils to make them make them a better medium for plant growth. And tillage changes soil properties a lot. Then we have irrigation. We have started irrigation to, again, all the interventions are to produce more food and more crops, more yields. So the latest intervention which we have done in the last century is application of nutrients through fertilizers. Prior to that, we were recycling nutrients in the form of organic manures, but particularly from 1950s, we have been applying a large amount of nutrients, particularly nitrogen, to produce more and more crops. By the way, in India, we apply nitrogen fertilizers almost 70% of the global consumption. China is number one, number two is India, and because both of these countries have large populations to support, so they have to apply large amount of fertilizers to produce food for the burgeoning population. And according to estimates, about 50% of the crop yields which are attributable to fertilizers, nutrients supplied by fertilizers. And in the recent estimation, about over 48% of the more than 7.7 billion people alive today, they are living because of increased crop production made possible by applying nitrogen fertilizers. And if we don't apply any fertilizers, then we have to convert more of the forested lands into under crops, and as we reduce the land under forest, we will have other different problems. So we can't afford to reduce the area under forests. So to do that, we need to produce more or higher crop yields from the same amount of same area of the soil area under crops, and for that we need very healthy soils. We can't afford that soil health is deteriorated. And today, as the topic of my talk, today we are going to see whether the fertilizers, particularly nitrogen fertilizers, which is most important one is urea, whether application of urea is really harmful to the soil in the long run, or it is okay. So this is the main issue which I am going to discuss with you, and let's see. Well, if you look at these two graphs, the first graph which shows cereal production, and the red dots they show the fertilizer nitrogen use, the amount of fertilizer nitrogen which we have been applying since 1960. So the yields have been increasing along with increasing fertilizer nitrogen use. The main, as I said again and again, the major fertilizer which we are applying to our crops, nitrogen fertilizer, is urea. If you look at the second graph, that shows grains produced per kilogram of fertilizer nitrogen applied. And if you look at this graph, from 1960 onward, there's a very steep fall. And many people, the layman or even politicians or planners, sometimes they look at this graph and they say that the cereal grain produced per kilogram of fertilizer has fallen so steeply that indicates that the health of our soil is really falling. I just give below the cereal grain production is increasing from 117 million ton to 482 million tons in 2020, and fertilizer use has increased from 0.7 million ton to 24.6 million tons in 2019. So fertilizer use is increasing like anything, and so is the cereal grain production, and this is how we are able to we are almost self-sufficient in terms of food production for our country, although our population is increasing like anything. So before we move ahead, we must why we need to apply fertilizers. Prior to fertilizer application, the agriculture was still there, and there are natural ecosystems which are in which nutrients are completely recycled. Say 200 or 300 years ago, there were no fertilizers, but the system was sustainable, but at a very low level because nutrients were recycling. But in the agriculture which we are practicing now, we are removing a lot of yield. Like we produce something like 5 to 6 tons of rice per hectare, 4 to 5 tons of wheat per hectare, and we remove those grains from the field, and those grains take away nutrients as well. So until and unless we replenish those nutrients, the soil will not be able to produce same yields year after year. So that means we have to compensate the nutrient export by applying manures and fertilizers. Manures are okay, but manures, they contain very small amount of nutrients. For example, urea contains 46% nitrogen, manures contains only 1 to 2% of nitrogen. So to apply same amount of nitrogen through manure, we need a lot of manure, which we don't have at farm. So we have to apply mineral fertilizers to supply huge amount of nutrients which are taken away in the form of cereal grains which we are producing on the fields. So that means we cannot produce this much amount of food grains without applying fertilizers. The same thing, if I say that in other words, if we want to produce something like 3 to 10 tons of crop yields or different crops like rice, wheat, maize, so we will need fertilizers. And all our agricultural soils do not have capacity to supply enough nitrogen from the soil itself. Soil, by the way, all the soils contain nitrogen in them, but that is not enough to support high yield levels which we are producing by using high yielding varieties of cereals. And if the yield is say 1 ton per hectare, that automatically indicates that soil is not healthy. So this is one way of looking at the soil, whether it's healthy or not. If it's not able to produce enough, if it is not able to produce more than 1 ton per hectare or something like that, it means it is not, we can say it is not a healthy soil. And then when we apply nutrients to the soils, it is not simple addition and subtraction. We think that we apply 100 kilogram of nitrogen per hectare through urea to soil, and our crops also take a similar amount of, they remove the crop of rice or wheat that also remove very same amount of nitrogen from the soil. It's not that simple addition. When we grow crops in soil, even by not applying any fertilizer, crops still grow in the soil and they do remove nitrogen from the soil. But even when we apply fertilizer, more nitrogen is taken by the crop from the soil nitrogen rather than from the fertilizer nitrogen. And there are studies using 15N labeled fertilizers that around 50% of the nitrogen which is taken up by a high yielding variety of rice, wheat, or maize, 50% of the nitrogen which it removes from the soil, it comes from the soil sources rather than fertilizer sources. But that doesn't mean that the remaining part of the fertilizer is wasted or it is lost from the soil plant system to the atmosphere to pollute it. That remaining part of fertilizer nitrogen, which is not used by the crop in a given season, is actually that becomes a part of soil nitrogen. So it's a cycle going on. Whatever fertilizer we are applying this season, about 50% of it will be taken up by the crop. Remaining out of the remaining 50%, a large portion will go into the soil nitrogen pool, and some portion of it will be lost, say as nitrate leaching, which pollutes groundwaters, or which produces nitrous oxide emissions, which may cause climate change effects or all those things. But a large part will still remain in the soil, and that part, once it goes into the soil nitrogen pool, it will become available to the next crops. So I am tried to show schematically how it actually happens. This big circle is soil nitrogen pool. It is, let's not underestimate our soil. Soils contain about even the poorest soil contains about 2,000 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. But this nitrogen or soil nitrogen pool, it has to be mineralized to make nitrate or ammonium, which can be taken up by crops. So this mineralization process is very slow. It depends on moisture and temperature conditions, and it comes to this. There's a small soil mineral pool in the center in the magenta color. So fertilizer nitrogen or manure nitrogen, which when we apply, a part of it goes to the soil mineral pool, but a bigger part will go to the soil and pool. The important thing here is that crop plants will take nitrogen only from the soil mineral and pool, and losses of nitrogen will occur again from this pool only. So what we need is that this pool, if it becomes big, losses will be more. If it becomes small, if it becomes very small, then the crops will be feeling deficiency of nitrogen. So we have to maintain this all the two pools, the fertilizer nitrogen pool and soil and pool, so that soils remain healthy. Soil remains healthy means soils, they contain sufficient amount of organic matter or soil nitrogen, so that they are able to support crops year after year. And that is, in a way, it's a index of soil health. I have come to, I'm showing this again, this figure in which the grain produced per kilogram of fertilizer nitrogen was showing a very steep decline with time. And this decline is because our farmers have started producing high yields using high levels of fertilizer nitrogen. This curve, the curve in red, it is a response curve for response curve to fertilizer nitrogen. And because of the shape of this response curve, this steep fall was bound to occur, and it has occurred. And this kilogram of cereal grain produced per kilogram of fertilizer nitrogen, this we also call as partial factor productivity of nitrogen. It is a aggregate index, efficiency index of contribution of crop yield derived from soil nitrogen, the bigger pool, fertilizer and uptake efficiency, and efficiency with which nitrogen which is taken up by the crop, how efficiently it gets translated into yields. So all these things, it is the things are pretty complicated when we look into the grain yields or the crop production and how much fertilizer we are supplying. So they interact in a different in different ways to produce the yield and 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 uh, when our farmers are producing high crop yields, this partial factor productivity is bound to fall, and this is what we have seen. So coming to soil health, after giving this background about how nitrogen works in the soil, how fertilizer nitrogen and soil nitrogen interact to produce the crop yields. Let's now have a look at how we can look at soil health. Well, there are several factors which define soil health, but the two most important factors which define soil health are soil organic matter and soil biota. Soil organic matter, it regulates physical, chemical, and biological properties of the soil. And soil biota constitutes the primary agents in manipulating accumulation and decomposition of soil organic matter and decomposition and release of mineral nutrients to the soil ecosystem. If you look at, if I just go back to this picture again, the nitrogen from this soil and pool will be released to soil, mineral, and pool only with the action of soil biota, under the influence of soil moisture and temperature. So if we don't have a healthy soil in terms of soil biota or microbial life, the mineralization of soil nitrogen to this soil, mineral, and pool will be small, and we will not be able to produce a good yield of the crop. So I'll be concentrating on these two indices of soil health, how these are linked with the fertilizers, nitrogen fertilizers, which we are applying to the soil. And from this, we will I try to see whether the fertilizers which we are applying are adversely affecting the soil health or they are okay. Let's see. Yeah. So when we apply nitrogen fertilizers to the soil, they always lead to increase in total organic carbon, because when we apply fertilizer, when we apply nutrients, they help in producing more net primary productivity, and which lead to soil organic matter buildup. Then second way, that means this is a plus point. Fertilizers, when we apply fertilizers, there will be more biomass production, and even when we take away the grains for our consumption, the root biomass and the residues which are left in the field, they contribute towards soil organic matter buildup, or the big soil, big soil and pool gets bigger. Second way, when we apply nitrogen fertilizers, they generate acidity, and due to acidity, the microbial activity is reduced, and when it is reduced, the decomposition of soil organic matter is reduced also. So that also leads to buildup of soil organic matter. And in certain, not very important, in certain ecosystems, fertilizer nitrogen adversely affects the activity of lignin degrading microorganisms, thereby favoring organic matter accumulation. This is the third one is not very important, but the first one is the most important. Second one, I'll be dealing it again when we talk about soil biota. But if fertilizer nitrogen fertilizers are applied in large amounts, when I say word large means more than what is needed by the crops. Say like a recommendation for fertilizer nitrogen for rice and wheat in India is generally 120 kilogram nitrogen per hectare for rice or wheat and maize also. In some states it is 100, some states 150, but safely we can say it's around 120 kilogram nitrogen per hectare. But many, because urea particularly is very much highly available in a very subsidized rates in India, so many farmers, they have a tendency to apply large amount of fertilizer nitrogen to their crops. They think that because fertilizer is nitrogen, urea is very cheap, why not to apply more? Why to take a risk of nitrogen deficiency? So they end up in applying something like, particularly in states like Punjab, Haryana, or Western Uttar Pradesh. Many farmers have a tendency to apply even up to 180 or 200 kilogram of nitrogen per hectare. So our experiments, which we have studied from the response curve, we find that 120 kilogram nitrogen per hectare is sufficient to achieve the maximum or optimum grain yield. But when farmers apply, say 180 or 200 kilogram of nitrogen per hectare, then the excess fertilizer nitrogen which we apply to the soil, it leads to loss of soil organic matter or soil organic nitrogen, because it accelerates rate of decomposition of high CN ratio organic inputs or even soil organic matter through stimulation of microbial activity. So this is the way fertilizer nitrogen, when applied in excess of what is needed, it can lead to losses of soil organic matter. And when soil organic matter is lost, the soil health, as I said, there are two big indicators that the soil health is adversely affected. So let's see. This is how it works. But let's see if here I will just read it actually. If a decline in soil organic matter, the most important indicator of soil health following the application of synthetic fertilizer nitrogen would have been a general phenomena, it almost certainly would have a major consequence for food production, as it would have resulted in a spiral of decline in soil functioning and crop productivity. So what I want to say is that it is not a general phenomena that the fertilizer nitrogen which we apply to the soil, to the crops, it doesn't always lead to decline in soil organic matter. It will lead to decline in soil organic matter only when we applied excessive quantities of fertilizer nitrogen. This is a very important thing. Whenever farmers try to apply large amount of fertilizer nitrogen, then the possibility of declining soil health will occur. So I have summed up this whole, what I have said up till now, that this is in this graph, this part, the first part is below optimum N rate, above optimum rate is the second part, the right side. So when we are operating below optimum N rate, we are able to produce increasing grain yields, but with soil inorganic nitrogen is very small. I mean, the nitrogen which is available in the soil is small, but moment we apply more fertilizer nitrogen, the quantity of soil inorganic nitrogen increases, and that leads to decomposition of soil organic matter and loss of soil health. So this is in sum up, in nutshell, I mean, how the nitrogen fertilizers will affect the soil health. Let's see some data from experiments which are being done in India. These are long-term experiments on rice wheat system at different locations, running since 1970s or 1980s. And we have been applying fertilizer nitrogen in the range of 180 to 240 kilogram nitrogen per hectare to both the crops. The depth of the soil is this 15 to 20 centimeter. And here we are giving initial soil organic carbon level and final organic carbon level and change. You will see that in most of the experiments, there is a increase in soil organic carbon level by application of fertilizer. Only in 3 cases where initial value of soil organic carbon was very high, and this is generally in virgin soils or soils which are not under cultivation for a long time. Only in those soils, this soil organic carbon decline in soil organic carbon is observed. I will show you. I will explain to you why this is possible. If you recall, I said in the beginning, one of the major interventions in the soil is the tillage. When we till the soil, there is always loss of soil organic matter. And that's the reason why nowadays there is a lot of emphasis on conservation agriculture, which says that let's not till the soils. Earlier we have been thinking, or our farmers were also convinced that more we till the soil, better the yields are. But this tillage, excessive tillage of cultivation of the soils, that leads to soil organic matter loss. And if you look at the, let's go back to this same table. When the soil organic matter level is very high, like 9.2, 14.2, 9.2 grams per kg of soil, and all these experiments, they are tilled, cultivated soils actually. So because of tillage, there is a loss of soil organic matter in all the treatments. The positive thing which you are saying, it is a sort of, this positive changes, it has taken care of the loss which has occurred because of tillage also. So that means that if we don't apply any fertilizer or in control plots, there will always be a loss of soil organic matter because of cultivation. I showed you the next graph, the next table. These are the treatments in which we didn't apply any fertilizer, and you see the change is always negative. I mean, there's always a decline in soil organic matter, or there's a decline in soil health. And when we apply fertilizers, it helps to increase the soil organic matter or soil health, but it has to compensate the negative effect of cultivation as well. So if there are some studies based on I have taken up 3 studies. One is based on 64 long-term experiments, which are 5 to 130-year-old. Then there's 104 long-term experiments, which are 6 to 158-year-old, and then 20 long-term experiments from Europe, 16 to 108-year-old. And in all these, on an average, the percent this is the percent increase in soil organic carbon because of application of fertilizer nitrogen. So in all these experiments, there is a 8 to 13% increase in organic carbon, soil organic carbon, because of application of fertilizer nitrogen. That means fertilizer nitrogen, when we are applying at recommended rates or adequate amounts of fertilizer, they always lead to increased soil organic carbon or better soil health. This was all about soil organic carbon, and I'll be talking a little bit about the soil biota. Fertilizers, they also affect soil microbial community because there is they affect the relationship between diversity, community structure, and all those things. The fertilizers, when we apply to the soil, they do supply nutrients to the microbes as well. They directly apply nutrients, and indirectly they stimulate growth and enhancing root carbon flow. As I said, as indicated earlier also, nitrogen fertilizers, when we apply, they lead to soil acidification, and that of course adversely affects microbial growth. But generally, the adverse effect of soil acidification or high concentration of ammonia fertilizers is usually short term and only in the zone of application. At short term means the soil overcomes this bad effect. Well, like for soil organic carbon, there have been several studies in the last 2-3 decades which clearly indicate that fertilizer application favors the accumulation of bacterial residues and increases the soil microbial biomass. So soil quality in terms of increased soil organic matter and soil microbial biomass due to long-term application of fertilizer have been in some studies, due to I will just explain that how in long-term studies how it affects. So this is a meta-analysis of 107 data sets from 64 non-lowland rice long-term experiments from all over the world. And if you look, if we consider all the data sets together, the soil microbial biomass carbon has increased from average increase from 230 to 238 milligram per kg to 268 milligram per kg. But this is overall from all the sets. But if we divide those data sets as per the soil pH, in all those soils where pH is low or less than 5, there is definitely an adverse effect of application of fertilizer on soil microbial biomass. You can see it 240 to 230. But moment soil pH is more than 5, and when it is more than 7, there's a tremendous positive effect of fertilizer application on soil microbial carbon. And then duration of long-term experiment also has an effect only in short-term experiments. When we are talking of a long-term experiment, generally it is more than 10 years, although it's written the word here also duration of long-term, but when it is 5 to 10 years, the effect is negative. But moment after 10 years or so, if we are continuously applying fertilizer to a soil for 10 or more than 10 years, then there is a positive effect of fertilizer nitrogen on soil microbial biomass. So that shows that if we are applying fertilizers in the right quantity and in the right way, that it doesn't produce soil acidity, its effect on soil quality is always positive. So I'll try to sum up now. Nitrogen fertilizer do not destroy the soil health, provided they are applied at agronomically correct rates. And the best way to do that is to go for site-specific nutrient management, which is becoming popular now, using gadgets like leaf color charts or SPAD meter or crop sensors. Their use is increasing now, and we are different universities in India, they have already introduced leaf color chart, and they have given to the farmers recommendations that by using leaf color chart, they can work out field specific nitrogen requirements. And then if applied with if we apply as per if we are giving field specific nitrogen recommendation to the farmers, we are bound to we always lead to application of fertilizer nitrogen which is not excessive. And as I discussed with you, when we apply more than the need of the crop, only then it is harmful. Excessive or indiscriminate use of nitrogen fertilizer can be detrimental to soil health. This is the summary of this talk, that we should never ever apply excessive or indiscriminately nitrogen fertilizers. Like the farmers which have a tendency to apply much more than what is recommended, they will definitely lead to inferior or deterioration in soil quality, and effect of reduced soil quality will be visible after a couple of years, when they will have to produce a large amount of fertilizer, and even then with that amount of fertilizer they will not be able to produce high yields which they have been producing earlier by applying adequate amount of fertilizers. So efficient management of N fertilizer is very important. The take-home messages is that soil health and efficient nitrogen use go hand in hand. More efficient you are with nitrogen fertilizers, the healthier your soil will be, and vice versa. And before I end my talk, I would like to show you a very simple graph which shows fertilizer nitrogen consumptions in developing and developed countries from 1960 onwards. The red dots are developing countries like India and China. The developed countries are countries in North America and Europe, Western Europe. If you look, up to almost 1990, these developed countries were using more fertilizer for producing food crops. And after this time, almost 1990, the curve for developing countries is still going up like anything in a linear way. But the developed countries have actually reduced the use of nitrogen fertilizers because they could use strategies and techniques which led to application of fertilizer to the agricultural crops in a way that only the needed amount is applied. But in developing countries, because of our governments need that sufficient quantity of food is produced, they have highly subsidized fertilizers like urea, and farmers are applying the urea like anything. And this is the state of affairs. And if we continue to do that, the health of our soils will definitely be adversely affected unless we take measures to apply fertilizer as per crop needs. So this is what I wanted to convey to you. And let's see if there are any questions or if any discussion we can make on this thing, depending upon how much I could make to understand the story. Right. Any questions or any? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, sir, there was a slight glitch actually. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. It was a really very informative. You can stop sharing your slides, sir. It's fine.
Yeah, I think I have stopped sharing.
Never mind, sir. We'll continue to the discussion part as I have many questions coming up right away. So first of all, I wanted to ask a question about that. You have told that nitrogen fertilization is not actually affecting the soil health, but excess of fertilization is affecting the soil health. Yes. And as we have seen in the case of Punjab, there are so many areas which have become saline. The salinity of the soil has increased. So how can we replenish the soil back from that situation, sir?
Well, soil salinity is a different issue altogether. So the fertilizer nitrogen has no link with soil salinity. It is soil salinity is caused by different altogether different things. So I'm talking about normal soils and soils which we are using to produce cereals like rice, wheat, and maize in high productive areas like in Punjab, Haryana, or Western Uttar Pradesh. So my talk is, or what I wanted to emphasize is that if we are applying fertilizer nitrogen as per need of the crop, then it's okay. But moment we start applying fertilizers more than what is needed, then the soil health will be adversely affected. So that is the carry home message, and we should not mix it with soil salinity and other things.
Okay, so it is totally a different perspective.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, sir. So what are any other innovative ways, like you have in your last graph, you have told that the developed countries, they have the graph is slightly going down as compared to the developing countries. So they must be adopting to some innovative ideas to replenish their soil.
Yes, this is how they have done it actually. We are also aware of all those things, and we in India and in South Asia, we have introduced measures like there's this very cheap technique. We use leaf color chart. We use chlorophyll meter. Then we use some optical sensors to find the need of the nitrogen in a given field. Because the most important thing now is that we should go for field-specific nitrogen management. Until the developed countries which have shown the blue dots and they have actually gone, they are all using all those techniques to apply fertilizer as per need of the crop in a given field. Or so, but up till now, what we have given to our farmers in India or Pakistan or in Bangladesh or South Asia or in developing countries, that we have given a fixed amount, fixed recommendation. Like, so we told them, well, apply 120 kilogram nitrogen per hectare to rice, 120 kilo to wheat. So there is no way that farmer can decide whether my field needs more or less. And as I explained, that soil nitrogen is already there, and how much nitrogen from the soil can become available, we have to reduce fertilizer nitrogen accordingly to know that how much nitrogen is really needed. So, like for example, if we use a technique called leaf color chart, it measures the color of the green color of the leaf, and then from using that, depending on that leaf color, we can decide whether if the leaf is already dark green in color, it means it doesn't need any more nitrogen. But if we apply even then, like our farmers do, then it will lead to application of excessive amount of fertilizer nitrogen. And in those type of cases, the effect on soil quality will be adverse. So the thing is, this is it is a different talk altogether. There are so many ways that we can do it. The very first thing is that let first farmers don't apply more than what is recommended. First thing is this. If they can stick to the general recommendation, even then the thing will be okay. But our farmers, particularly in Punjab, as I explained, we recommend 120, they apply 180 or 200 kg nitrogen per hectare. So that should be avoided at number one. Then number two is, then they should try to find out, because all the fields are different. Each field has its own soil, and depending upon what kind of use we have put that field into, depending on that, the nitrogen supplying capacity of the soil in a given field is different from the adjoining field. So we need to give them techniques that they should be able to find out how much nitrogen is already available in the field. So we should reduce the fertilizer accordingly. So those gadgets are now available and are in Punjab. They are already given to the farmers, and they're a part of the recommendation. And many farmers are using them. And I can tell you, when our general recommendation is 120 kilogram nitrogen per hectare, by using leaf color chart, invariably farmers need not apply more than 90 kg nitrogen per hectare. In some fields, he need to even apply more. If a field is very poor, say if it is sandy, then he will. But generally, what we have found is that in 80 to 90% fields, we end up in application of less fertilizer than the general recommendation. So these type of things will have to be adopted in a very aggressive way to apply fertilizer as per the need of the crop and in a field specific manner.
Okay, thank you, sir. So there are any other ways, like we can integrate agriculture with any other sort of allied activities or agriculture to replenish the soil in such a way we get a natural fertilization. Can you enlighten us with this?
Well, since time immemorial, farmers have been applying organic manures like farmyard manure, and now we have poultry manures, pig manures, and all those things. So our first priority should be to use all whatever organic manures are available on the farm. We must apply all those. We should return those manures to the fields. We should not go for fertilizer immediately. We should first consider those manures and then supplement with mineral fertilizer. But what is happening now is that our farmers, because urea is very cheap, is highly subsidized. I mean, like a bag of 50 kg urea, which is available for around 250 kg, 250 rupees. Actual cost is 1,250, and it is so much subsidized, and it is in the total cost of inputs which farmer is applying. He thinks that, well, it is so cheap, why not to put 2 more bags of urea in the why to go for bulky manures? Because when we have organic manures, they are bulky in nature. They have to be accumulated, they have to be composted, and only then they will go to the field actually. So that involves some labor and those things. And the farmer generally, they shirk. I mean, it's better to go for urea, a couple of bags, 5 bags of urea and apply it. So farmers should first think of applying all available organic materials in the farm, and then use, once you apply organic manures, then by using field specific techniques, then we can work out how much more fertilizer is to be applied. So farmer need to go for this type of approach. Otherwise, blindly applying 5 bags of urea, 4 bags of urea, that will definitely lead to deterioration of soil health.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But sir, somebody has recently poked in the chat box that the use of organic manure reduces the crop yield. So how can you solve? How is that?
If when we grow a crop, it has a need for nitrogen. It has a specificness. Say 1 hectare of land, and if we are not applying enough nitrogen through organic manure, yields will decline.
Okay.
So that's the point. I mean, simply saying that by applying organic manure, yield decline, it's not the case. If we are able to apply enough organic manure to fulfill the need of the crop, then the yield will not decline. But when I say this thing, we must always keep it in mind that our farmers do not have enough organic manure at their disposal, that they can put organic manures only to all of their land and produce food. That is the point. That's the reason why we have to depend upon fertilizers to replenish those nutrients which we are removing. Nowadays, if you look at, say, before 1950s, the crop yields were 1 to 2 tons per hectare of wheat, 2 to 3 tons per hectare of rice. And now we are 7 to 8 tons of rice and 5 to 6 tons per hectare of wheat. So when we are removing such huge amount of nutrients from the fields, we have to replenish those nutrients. And organic manures, they do not contain enough nutrients. And even if we want to, then we need to apply a lot of organic manures. And our farmers do not have that much quantity of organic manures. That's the reason when they apply less of organic manures, yield will decline.
Okay.
So they have to think in terms of total amount of nitrogen which we have to apply to the crop.
Okay, sir. So we have a question. So definitely only organic and only urea cannot be. It is a beneficial to always have the combination of them in our farm.
As I said, first think of organic sources and then supplement with inorganic sources.
Okay. So we have some of our participants wants to know that how government is awareing these farmers to use these fertilizers, not to use these fertilizers excessively. Like you told that we have technologies like the leaf color count. Those are beneficial for the farmers? And being a farmer, do they have that much know-how to access it by themselves?
Well, this type of things have started in the last decade or so. They are now, like in state like Punjab, it is a general recommendation, and most of the farmers know about it. There's a technique called leaf color chart, not leaf color count, but leaf color chart. It's a small strip of plastic strip with the different shades of green color on it, and we simply compare the leaf of the color with the shades on the leaf color chart, and depending upon the color, we can decide whether it needs more nitrogen or not. And if yes, how much? There are ways to use, and it's very simple. It's not very complicated, and many farmers have started using it. And then there are some expensive things like chlorophyll meters or optical sensors. Those things are good, but up till now, we are not able to give to the farmers because it takes a lot of money. And the leaf color chart, on the other hand, is just cost 100 rupees, and it's a one-time cost. and any number of farmers can use it. And simple things are available. But before going for these type of things, I would say that let our farmers stick to the general recommendation which we give to the farmers. Even that will be very helpful. They should not apply more than what we are recommended to them. Even that will do the job.
Yes, as it is wisely said, there's excess of everything is bad. So
Yes, that's
definitely
right.
excess
That's
of
right.
higher fertilizers is bad for our soil
There
health.
are all type of losses by applying excess fertilizer. Number one, economic loss, because fertilizer is not free. He has to buy it from the market. Number two, he's losing the soil quality. Number three, whatever nitrogen fertilizer he's applying in excess, a large part of it will be leaching down to the groundwaters, and a big part of it will going as nitrous oxide to the atmosphere. That will cause the climate change. And whatever nitrogen goes into the groundwater, it pollutes it. It pollutes it for the purpose of drinking. It is good for when we apply it for irrigation, it's fine because it contains nitrogen. But when we drink it, there is a disease called 𝘉𝑵𝐻𝐵. I mean, all those things. I can tell you, I mean, in Punjab particularly, in the last 30 years, the nitrate level in groundwaters has increased more than 10 times, I think. I tell you, in 1970s, the value was only 0.5 milligram nitrogen per liter, and now it is average is 5. And when this value will exceed 10, the water will not remain fit for drinking. And we must think that all our rural population depend upon groundwater for drinking purposes.
It is a shocking. It's really shocking
Right.
to know about that.
And it has happened because of excessive use of nitrogen fertilizers in Punjab.
So for the participants, the take-home message is this only: use wisely, live wisely. It's better we want for a sustainable living standards.
Yeah, apply only that much what is needed by the crop. Don't apply more.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for such an enlightening talk today. We are really at a very short time, and I'm seeing on my screen that our next speaker, Dr. Bhaskar, has also joined. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, I also enjoyed giving my talk. Hopefully, it was useful to the participants.
Yes, sir, it was very useful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, participants, for your really patience for having me as a host now. Now it's over to Dr. Himani for the next session. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Dr. Google, ma'am. Hello, everyone. A very warm good morning to all. I, Himani Gautam, Chief Associate Editor, Just Agriculture Magazine, cordially welcomes you all in this session of the 15 days online training cum workshop program on Agriculture 2.0, a next level approach towards sustainability, smart farming, and agri-innovation. Our previous guest, Dr. Vijay Singh, has very beautifully explained his topic and enlightened us about the impact of nitrogen fertilizer on soil health. He answered all the questions of our participants. And thank you so much, sir, for the extremely informative session. So now let's move forward. Madam C.J. Walker once said, and I quote, don't sit down and wait for the opportunities to come. Get up and make them. And our next guest is the perfect example of this quote. With this, I warmly welcome our guest of this session, Mr. Bhaskar Rao. He is the consultant of hydroponics in UAE. But before that, I would like to introduce Sir to inspire our participants. So before beginning his career, he has great interest in agriculture field. And out of his interest, Sir got enrolled for a certificate course on high-tech cultivation of vegetables at Institute of Horticulture Technology, India. Later on, Sir has completed his BSc Agriculture from Manipur University. Sir has done his Masters in Food and Agriculture Marketing Management from University of Mysore. Mr. Roy, sir, has given his services as Certified Crop Advisor Agriculture in the field of agriculture operations and related sciences to the American Society of Agronomy. For more than 9 years, sir has served as Project Manager of the Advanced Horticulture, UAE. Sir worked as operation manager of farms for more than 7 years. Furthermore, Sir has worked as Chief Agronomy Officer, Vegetech at San Francisco Investment LLC for more than 2 years. He also served as advisor to the board of Vegetech at San Francisco Investment LLC. As per now, Sir is currently serving as consultant hydroponics and controlled environment agriculture. Sir, we are very grateful to you that you have decided to join us and gave your valuable time and information to us. It is our privilege to directly interact with you here. So now I would like to invite Mr. Bhaskar Rao sir to deliver his lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. Hope I'm audible.
Yeah, sir, you are perfectly audible.
Thank you so much, and very good morning from Dubai. I would thank all the members, all the team members and the team leaders at Just Agriculture who have taken the initiative to get in touch with me, and then it was a great interaction with Dr. Badwal, and special thanks to Dr. Siddharth Nayak for getting me online. So it was a very good introduction, Ms. Imani. Thank you so much. Just before I start, I just would like to say that I'm just going to give you a brief knowledge, a brief idea about the total contents of what hydroponics is. So let me just start it off immediately by sharing my screen. Right. Yeah. Is my screen visible?
Not yet, sir. So now your screen is visible.
Yeah.
Kindly make it full screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir, it's full screen now. You can continue.
Thanks, everyone, once again. So let me just talk to you about hydroponics, and let me just make you understand exactly what topics I'm going to cover in today's lecture. It's basically, I just want to give you a brief introduction of what hydroponics is, because there is a myth around that, they are confusing with lots of other things, hydroponics. And I would like to also share the history of hydroponics, the methods of hydroponics, types of hydroponics, and what are the grow media that we use for doing hydroponics. What are the advantages and what are the challenges? I mean the disadvantages. And when there is a challenge, when there is a disadvantage, we do have the opportunities. So I would like to start off immediately with what is hydroponics. See, basically hydroponics is, it's a Greek word they say, it's from the internet. Say it's hydro means water and phonics labor, it's working with water. But in scientific terms, what it specifically means is you're applying a nutrient-rich water medium to the root zone of the crop. So the root zone of the crop could be dangling in the same water media, or it could be in any sort of inert media. So that's hydroponics. That is basically nutrient-rich water being delivered to the root zone directly. So when we talk of hydroponics, people say that, yeah, it's a very recent approach. But no, this has been coming from long. It was from 600 BC. You could see the chart here, it shows the hanging gardens of Babylon was growing plants in water. Then it moved on, and now in the present stage, it is being developed developed in such a way that people are making lots of research and development and trying to add crops to such hydroponic systems of growing, apart from the typical leafy greens and lettuces that they usually do in the active hydroponics. So you could see during the Second World War, also there were huge areas under hydroponics, but basically it was a very rudimentary level of hydroponics. It was being used by the Americans and the Japanese to feed their soldiers back in other areas, especially in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Persian Gulf also. The Persian Gulf had a lot of issues with access and logistics, so they were having their own rudimentary type of hydroponics, whereby they used to have large ponds of water with some sort of mud which is having some sort of nutrient content, and put some raft on it and to the plants for feeding their soldiers with fresh vegetables during the Second World War. So that was the state when people were doing it in a commercially large scale. Of course, in the 70s, NASA has started doing it, and the long-term space flights, they have been using it, and recently also they have done it in Mars. So it is going places. So let's talk about the methods of hydroponics. Now, basically, there are two general methods of hydroponics. First, you should be very clear, is called the solution culture or the active hydroponics. The other is the medium culture or the passive hydroponics. The active hydroponics uses water as a grow medium. So there are different methods like the static, the stagnant one, the continuous flow, which is NFT, neutron film technology, the ebb and flow, okay, which is flood and drain. Then you have the DWC, which is a deep water culture. Then you have different other systems of advanced hydroponics, or you call it aeroponics or 𝑭𝑔𝑚 and rotary system. So I will talk to you only about hydroponics, which goes only up to the first, second, third, fourth levels. Like static, continuous flow, ebb and flow, and DWC. So this is called the solution culture, because we use a solution, a nutrient-rich solution to grow the crops. Next is the medium culture. Medium culture uses inert material. It uses inert porous material which could hold or retain moisture in the media. That could be gravel, that could be perlite, that could be rock wool, that could be cocoa peat or cocoa husk, or that could also be the 𝐿𝐸𝐻𝐿𝐸𝐻 balls, which is lightweight expanded clay aggregates, the round balls which you see mostly being used in NFTs and other systems of indoor plants. Also they use these systems in landscaping indoor plants. So these are the basic two big methods of cultivation. Let's get back to the types of hydroponic cultivation. The hydroponic system, there are various different types of hydroponic systems. Initial system which was developed was called the wick system, whereby you have a wick which usually it works on the physics, principle of physics, by it uptakes the water from by the wick into the plant. This is used basically for mainly growing some sort of house plants or some sort of microgreens also could be used in this wick system. I'm just taking you through the whole history that developed slowly. Then we have got the DWC culture. This is a typical diagram of the DWC culture, but now it has been modified into different types of DWC, which is, it could be in beds, it could be in tables, or it could be in larger ponds. So this uses basically a nutrient solution beneath, which has an air pump. It could be an air stone if it's a small unit, or if it's a commercial unit, it could be an air pump, which gives lots of oxygenation because it helps in oxygenation. The water beneath has to be having a controlled temperature. The water should be chilled at a particular temperature. We prefer it to be around 18 to 20 or 22, maximum 18 to 22. And this is also a circulatory system. It's a closed circuit. The water could be drained, and we have got a drainage that water goes back to the reservoir and comes back. And on the top, you have a styrofoam platform or a plate or a raft, which has some sort of planting holes in that, and the plants could either be placed in these holes through a net pot or directly from your grow media, like from a grow plug. It could be a FISSS grow plug or a grow plug. We'll deal about that medias in the later slides. So this is a DWC type of growing system. So this is a typical DWC growing system, whereby you have got the roots beneath, and then these are tables with which helps in ergonomics because the grower did not be bending onto the front, so it comes at 80 centimeter height tables, and the tables contains the nutrient-rich media. So this is how the DW system is done. Then you have the ebb and flow. This is a flattened drain, so you have pots which have got some media into them. There are holes beneath the pots, so you flat them so the water absorbs, and then you drain it after a point in time, depending upon the size or the stage of the crop. Here, the solution will be down on the tray or the grow tray or the pond or the pots, whatever tray that is holding that solution. It drains back into the reservoir and then again gets back into the system. So this is the ebb and flow or the flattened drain system, which is basically more used for nursery cultivations and pot plant cultivations in herbs. Usually when you're doing herb in pot plants and nursery plants for landscaping or also for food crops, this type of system could be used. The next is the drip system. It's a very common method of growing system for any commercial application. You have got a media that holds the plant, and then you have got individual drips, and these drips are again the drainage water is collected back into the system. So this is a typical system, but the basic system what is being used for all sorts of hydroponics, especially for domestic purposes, for balconies or for houses or even for indoor vertical farms, is the nutrient film technology, which is NFT, and they use them in grow channels or waterways. They call grow channels or waterways, and then it is water is pumped into this grow channels as a nutrient film always remaining in the grow tube or the grow tray, and then it has got a definite prescribed gradient that the water runs back into the tank or reservoir, and then there is a air pump and there is a temperature control to control the water, and this is a closed loop circuit. So you could see here, these you can see this is the waterway. So this is the inlet, and you have got outlet at the other end. So this is a closed circuit. This is an indoor vertical farm. So we have got LED lights here, which will help in replacing the sunlight. So this is a system of growing whereby we call it NFT, and this is widely used all over the world now. The next would be aeroponics, which I'm not going to do in detail. It is the roots are dangling in the container or reservoir, and there are pumps with nozzles with high density nozzles, which sprays to the root zone. The fine mist is sprayed to the root zone time and again to keep the roots moist and wet, and also helps in and this is a nutrient-rich media, so nutrition fertigation happens automatically. So when we talk of all this, let us get back to the principles of growing, like the grow media. What are the different types of grow media? What type of grow media to be selected for which type of cultivation? So basic idea of what a grow media should be. The attributes of a grow media: it should be having a high water holding capacity. The substrate which has a high water holding capacity, all the time will be helpful for the plants to absorb the water. But there are other things which you have to look into, which I'm not discussing in this space because that goes into typical very long discussion, because we have to talk about the C and the ratio. We have to talk about CEC and everything. I'm just giving you a broad perspective. So the grow media should be having the capacity to hold the water. Also, it should have the capacity for drainage, because if it is oversaturated, it becomes a breeding ground for plant fungal diseases. So there should be a proper water holding capacity and also a water drainage capacity for the media. And the media should be durable, okay, so that it could be reused, so that we preserve the environment. So it should be durable and it should be reused, and it should be supportive. Like it should be having a good texture that could anchor the plant, that could anchor the root zone and hold the root zone firmly. Because we are not only doing leafy greens and lettuces, we are doing all sorts of crops in hydroponics. I'm talking of the passive hydroponics. We do all sorts of crops. We can talk of eggplants, we can talk of tomatoes or capsicums, bell peppers, or jalapenos, or whatever you think of any crop, cucumbers, basically. These are the major crops, vegetable crops that are grown in controlled environment agriculture in greenhouses using the passive system of hydroponics. So, passive system of hydroponics, you could cultivate all sorts of vegetable crops in the greenhouses or even in open fields if you're having problems with your soil. The best and the cheapest method of cultivation is the coco peat, and it is biodegradable. It is abundantly found all over in India and other Southeast Asian countries, and it is, as it says, it's lightweight, it's 100% renewable. It holds huge amounts of water, and there is some sort of air also. It is porous, so it has got porosity, it has got water holding capacity, it has got a very good drainage. If it is dry, it could be rehydrated. Okay, it could be rehydrated after being dehydrated. So that is the main advantage of using this, because when you're using the coco peat, when you're using your coco peat for the subsequent crop, what is generally done is we dehydrate, completely make it dry, so that all sorts of just try to do some sort of solarization, right? For the soil. So do that, and then it is again given water, so it's completely rehydrates itself and ready for use again. Basically, it's completely environment friendly. And then we have the rock wool. This rock wool, what I'm showing you here, is the grow plugs. These are, there are some rocks, plastic rocks, that are put into a furnace, and it's melted in molten. It is melted, and the molten material which comes out is it's very fibrous. So this helps in retention of water and moisture. So these are the grow plugs. There are also grow slabs, which could be used as a grow media, similar to the coco peat grow media. So the rock wool is not biodegradable at all, and it is quite harmful because it is a it's a elastic rock, and basically it is quite disadvantageous. But people usually, as of now, are still using it in a few of the countries, because some of the countries are replacing these with coco peat grow media. But for the propagation of saplings, it is still being used in some of the major Indo-vertical farms all over the world. Another basic disadvantage is it has got a high pH level, so it has to be soaked in neutral pH and then bring down the pH to our desired levels before using the rock wool. So it is not biodegradable, so not very friendly to the environment. Also, perlite. Perlite is a volcanic glass. Perlite is quite. It is like a popcorn. It usually heated up. It's a volcanic rock. It is when it's heated up, it pops up. So it has got it is like it helps in porosity. It helps in increasing the porosity. Perlite is usually mixed with coco peat, because when you're using only coco peat as a grow media, sometimes there is clogging. Sometimes there is a lot of clogging if the proper coco peat, the fiber content is not proper. So perlite is used to help it in aeration. It is chemically completely inert, doesn't have any sort of nutrients in that, so it is completely inert. So you can start your fertigation programs and your recipes from zero. Perlite is popular application for cutting trays and seedlings. It's also used as grow bags, like your coco peat grow bags or your rock wool grow bag. They also got perlite grow bags. So these are the perlite grow bags that have used many parts of the world. They are using these coco peat grow bags. It's a grow bag. You can just put the plant onto the grow bag and then hit it with drippers to give you irrigation. The drainage is also collected, and the nursery is raised in rock wool. So rock wool sits on the grow bag slab. So usually what happens now is they are also producing grow cubes to propagate the plant or to raise the nursery directly in the perlite grow cubes. There are a few companies coming up with this. But basically, what we all do here all over the world, especially in the Middle East, is we raise the crop in a grow cube, which is a rock wool grow media, and then once the plant is ready, we transplant it into the grow bag, perlite grow bag. Most of them are using this LICA, lightweight expanded clay aggregates. It has got a very long life cycle. It's environment friendly, and it has got superior oxygenation and water retention because of its various shapes. It is round, so you have a lot of air spaces. It absorbs moisture, allows drainage. So this is one of the best media that is used to raise saplings and then transplant them into your NFT channels. Also, these are used in most of the indoor plants in shopping malls or in restaurants or in airports. So they also have a system of taking the water in that. So there is a water level inside there. So it's easy for maintenance and all that stuff. So this is used in some of the NFT systems. So when we're talking of all this, we have to talk about advantages. We all know that there are lots of advantages of doing hydroponics. I need not explain you. There is a list of advantages. Soil is needed and water is recycled. No nutritional waste because whatever nutrient-rich water you're using is being recycled. So you don't have loss of any sort of nutrients, and there is no leaching into the soil. Higher and stable yields, and you have got in the soil, you have got competition for weeds and food from other sources. So you don't have any soil-borne diseases in hydroponics. It is of course less labor-intensive when you're talking about hydroponics, but there are limitations in hydroponics when you're talking about active hydroponics. Passive hydroponics, as I already mentioned, which has got a wide range of crops that will be grown. And let's talk about advantages. There are many advantages, but we also should understand that there are a few disadvantages. What I mean by disadvantages is the challenges. So when there are challenges, there are opportunities. As I mentioned you in my opening statement, that we would like to have challenges, so we would enhance our knowledge or enhance our skill development and capacity building to get over those challenges. And it is the need of the hour, because we have got lots of fresh young graduates coming out. So there are lots of challenges that are being faced by the industry. So you have got these challenges. Apart from these challenges which I am showing you on the screen, there are various other challenges. So the challenges could be converted into opportunities, which I'm going to show you in the next few slides before I end my So there is a constant monitoring is required. Now, because it is hydroponics, you're like treading on a double-edged razor. You cannot. There is nothing called a soil buffer. There is nothing called a buffer. The roots are directly hanging in the nutrient-rich media. So constant monitoring is required for all the parameters of growth. And it is when you're talking of a system, it is not very cheap. It doesn't come cheap. It is expensive. There should be a constant supply of power. So there should be a constant supply of electricity from the grid. So any sort of power outages will make a big issue to your system, because everything is like semi-automated. It has got pumps for the circulation. It has got aeration pumps. It has got water circulation pumps. It has got water chillers to cool the temperature. And if it's a controlled environment agriculture, you have to have a cooling system whereby you control the air temperature or the leaf temperature of the crop. So microorganisms that are water-based can creep in rather easily, because any sort of unhygienic method of growing or cultivation, and there is a exposure to high-level exposure of contamination of microorganism contamination, microbiological contamination of water, because it's a closed-loop circuit, and it requires technical expertise. This is the point where I would like to share with everyone. It's not an easy task. Like usually people, sorry to say that, they just sell you the hardware that okay, you buy my channels, you put the seed, they give you the seed starter, and they give you the grow plugs, and you just put the seed in there and start growing, and you become a hydroponic farmer. No, that's not the case. It could be a hobby. It could be a place where you can learn things, where you can understand, and then maybe develop on that. So it needs technical expertise. It needs to be a agronomist, a plant physiology. You should be very able to understand plant physiology, plant pathology, and of course all the other parameters of pH or EC, water temperature, air temperature, vapor pressure deficit, CEC. All those which we have studied, in graduation, comes in a nutshell when we talk about hydroponic expertise. And in NFTs, in water liquid production is limited to compared to field conditions. When you're talking of NFT grow media, whereby you're using water as a grow media, which is active hydroponics. Okay? And if a disease appears, all the plants in the system will be affected because it's a closed circuit. Any sort of soil-borne or waterborne or fungal disease or helps comes in, and it's the whole thing is affected, the whole system is affected. So you see, when I'm talking of constant monitoring, this point here is without soil to serve as a buffer, if the system fails, plants death will occur rapidly. So there is nothing called buffering. Okay, there is nothing called the leaching, whereby you put in extra fertilizer, as the previous speaker was saying. Dr. Saab was saying. So there is nothing called a buffering. There is nothing buffering. The plant will immediately fail. You are treading on a double displacer. So these challenges have to be overcome. So to overcome these challenges, we have got lots of opportunities with us. So you see, urban agriculture. Let's get back to urban agriculture, because hydroponics basically deals with urban agriculture and more into controlled environment agriculture, which is CA, which includes hydroponics, rooftop farming, aquaponics or aeroponics. This is the new culture that is catching up. It is good that people are getting aware, getting conscious of eating nutritious, healthy, and safe food, without any sorts of heavy metal or pesticides residues in the crop. But the only issue here is, let me be very frank with you, that we do have, are too many participants in this industry. Okay, too many participants who have literal, actual crop production knowledge and expertise. Okay, you have got all the software that helps you in making a decision. It helps you in making a decision to understand what type of crop you're holding, you're growing, or you can make a decision based on all those parameters, but without the knowledge of crop production and without the knowledge of agriculture as such, crop physiology or crop pathology, you are not able to perform well if you have a system which is having only the hardware. And the driver behind all this is the agronomist. So without the help of the agronomist, we just cannot get into commercial farming of crops by hydroponics. Even if it is in a in a hobby level, semi-commercial hobby level, or maybe on your building rooftops, that requires constant monitoring by an agronomist. See, how do we overcome these challenges? We can overcome these challenges if the urban youth in India, they embrace high-tech advanced control environment agriculture. In growing them in rooftops, in warehouses, or wherever there are places, just start growing them and try to make the people aware about how the cultivation is done, how it is done, so that people understand, apart from also the hardware that is being supplied, about the growing, how it is to be grown, which are the crops that are required by the family or the building or the nearest shop which they are targeting. It could be leafy greens, it could be cucumbers, it could be microgreens, it could be any sort of crop that you are really interested in cultivating. So when you're talking of all this, you should talk of skill development. So that requires a sort of making people aware and understand exactly how hydroponics has to be done. So the skill development is a very important part to generate employment and also food security, with the rational use of using the resources, because we should be using the resources very rationally, so that we produce healthy and nutritious food for this number of population. So you see, you can have a figure here which I've taken out from the internet. I have studied there. It says 41% of Indian population is below the age of 20%. particularly specifying Indian population. See, 41% is below. So there is a huge area where you need to train and develop skill and capacity building for the youth to generate employment, self-employment, to produce their own food, or to supply, or to help. So many other parameters are there which can be helped. You should not be basically an agriculture graduate or an agronomist to help grow this industry. This industry is being supported by so many other subsidiary and tertiary industries that this industry has to grow to such a level that employment becomes quite open. There are lots of scope for employment, a lot of scope for food, safe, healthy food being produced in your neighborhood, which is grown locally, so that you have the economy being within your community. See, it's just in general, I'm just talking about the global agriculture market. The global ag market is, the offering. I was talking to you about the offering. There is the hardware, which comes in the pumps, motors, pipes, all those. Then the software, the computer-enabled ERP solutions, and all the services. Then you have it is divided by market value, like this the market value of the global precision farming or the vertical farming or hydroponic farming. There's a market value for each of these crops. And then you're talking about the technology. There is various levels of technology by guidance technology for open fields, huge cropping areas, remote sensing technologies or variable rate technologies, VRTs. So by offering, by market value, by technology, we have got so many scope or so many areas where each one of us could find ourselves, could fit ourselves as per our own expertise. So by application, is yield monitoring is an area where you could monitor yield, field mapping, crop scouting, very important crop scouting. It requires the knowledge of the plant pathologist or a plant physiologist to understand the diseases or pests, infestations, and also the nutritional imbalances. Weather tracking and forecasting to understand what type of weather is being forecasted, so that you are ready, the agronomist is ready with that type of weather that is coming up. Suppose you have got an overcast sky or a cloudy day or all that, you should be having that eye or having that thought that, okay, let's get ready with some sort of fungal disease that will be coming in. Maybe it could be downy mildew or a powdery mildew that will be coming in. So, and you have got irrigation management, lots of irrigation, plumbing, systems, dosing units. It could be anything. Then farm labor management, whereby you have got various types of managerial abilities to manage all the farm laborers, supervisors, all the activities through systems, so high-tech advanced systems. Then of course you have got financial management and so many others, and so on and so forth. There are so many areas where one could fit it. So the job market classification, I would like to say, I would like to put it in a nutshell here. It's like, hydroponic system segments includes aggregate hydroponic system, closed system, or open system. So it could be, the job market could be in the hydroponic system segment. So it could be a closed system or open system. It could be, active or a passive or whatever you select. So there's a huge scope, as I've already discussed earlier, the different types of methods of cultivation and different media. It could be NFT, it could be DWC. When you're talking of liquid hydroponics, when you're talking of aggregate hydroponics, it could be the media, the passive hydroponics, raw media, coco peat, perlite, rock wool, etc. And also the basis of crops. See, there are huge companies which are crop specific. Some companies do as a full basket of vegetables. So when you're talking of crop specific crops, there are lots of crops that are doing companies, big commercial companies, which are basically doing, for example, only bell peppers, or maybe only strawberries, or maybe only blueberries. It's catching up now, or maybe only lettuces or cucumbers. So it depends upon that specific crop specific. So you get an expertise in that particular crop. Of course, with your broad knowledge of all other systems of cultivation, all other crops. If you're having expertise in one of the crops, then you have got a cut above the rest of the people in the same industry. So you could push yourself to a further level. And also, there are places where I'm just trying to put in some ideas here so that the young generation is aware and understand exactly where all they could fix themselves or put themselves or look up to after they finish their graduation or whatever type of education they are undergoing now. It could be PhD, it could be any other type of education. See, there is a high need of getting all the farms and urban farms and hydroponic farms certified with Global Gap or ISO and food safety and HACCP. So you need to do an internal audit of the farm to understand what are the gaps in the farm, so that you understand what type of system the client needs. So there is a scope for being auditors of the crop. You have to get into Global Gap good practices, ISO food safety and HACCP. It's a very nice field of job opportunity. So the QA, quality analysis and quality control, vegetable procurement, dispatch, trading company. So you can fit in as a QA if you're having good knowledge of all the various certifications of Global Gap or BRC or Leaf Mark or ISO, okay, SEDEX or HACCP. So all this could help one in getting yourself as a QA, QC or QHSC, quality, health, safety and environment. So it could be placed in vegetable procurement companies or dispatch companies, trading companies. You have got some knowledge of good computer background with IT skills. You could fit into Indo-vertical farm data analyst. IVF is Indo-vertical farm data analysts, grow app developers, because there are lots of apps that are coming up nowadays to, of course, to sell the produce, and of course also to handle your farm, your smart farm, or it could be a field, it could be an Indo-vertical farm. So there are lots of research. There's a lot of data available. There's a lot of data available in the cloud. There is a lot of AI and machine learning which is getting into that. So these are the places whereby you can fit yourselves. Of course, as a basic grower also, as hydroponic grower, like me, hydroponic grower, so that's place where I have my expertise in Indo-vertical farms and greenhouse and CEA and all this controlled environment agriculture, open fields, wherever. So this is the place where hydroponic grower is required. So the other parameters will help the grower to make a few decisions. And with some specialties, in exotic vegetables, because the purchasing power in India is increasing. So you have got lots of people exploring themselves to new food. They want to explore new food. They have been traveling. There's a lot of internet buzz about new foods and exotic vegetables. People want to try out new things. So if you have a specialty in cultivation of new exotic vegetables or lettuces, leafy greens, herbs, or edible flowers, then you have a very good opportunity or a very good scope ahead and a very good career ahead of you. Then also you have got hydroponic equipment. I just mentioned sales because hydroponic equipment has to be correlated with agriculture. When you're selling the hydroponic equipment, you have to understand exactly what type of crop the client is want to grow as per his market research. So you need to specifically understand what type of crop, what type of climate, what type of all other parameters of growth are involved. Then you could recommend that particular type of hydroponic growing system, hydroponic grow equipments that could be helpful for the grower. You could also become hydroponic instructors, like conduct trainings for people, conduct trainings for schools and colleges, and become aware of this new system of cultivation, which could be inculcated in a small level, house level, domestic level, or also in semi-commercial or commercial levels. And of course, the last is the grow media. There are various types of grow media. You can talk of cocoa peat grow media. There are various types. There are cocoa peat grow coir, which you can grow just like a mat. You can grow your microgreens in that. There is a grow media like Oasis foam or rockwool foam, or it could be cocoa peat bags. It could be cocoa peat as grow plugs. So various grow medias, whichever are applicable in the market, which are found in the market, you have a scope of placing yourself in that area, that field. So I would like to conclude by saying that I just like to read this out, and it's very interesting because I have summed it up with my whole experience. An agriculture graduate to fit himself or herself in the modern day urban agriculture, which is CEA, has to have mastered all the subjects in the graduate courses with special emphasis on plant physiology, plant pathology, agri-engineering, soil science, very important, even though we're not dealing with soil, and agri-economics. Agri-economics, very important. The physics, chemistry, math, and biology is all. So he should be completely encyclopedia. So we need to steer the nation's economy and feed the growing population within the framework of the United Nations SDGs 2030. So it has to come in such a way that you are also helping the environment. You're also helping not to have lots of greenhouse gas emissions. You should be using biodegradable stuff and producing safe, healthy, and nutritious food. So you have to be adaptable to change. So it says usually that it's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the most adaptable. And I would like to conclude my lecture with this statement. And thanks for everything. And I'm open to any sorts of questions for now. This is my address.
Thank you so much, sir, for the valuable information. Now we have some questions from the participants. So with your due permission, may I take the questions?
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay, sir, thank you so much. So the first question, which I got from a lot of participants, that how much initial investment is required for setting up a hydroponics farm in India, particularly in India?
See, let me be very frank. I just cannot give you figures because I'm not into commercial cultivation of hydroponics in India. Sorry, but I left India in 2000. So it is now already 21 years. So I have no idea, and I have been in the Gulf from all these areas. I can talk to you about the situation in the Gulf, but the cost is of course expensive. It is you can say it is around. It could be around at least 8 to 10 times of what you are projecting for a normal farming cultivation. It depends upon the size. It depends upon the automation. It depends if you're talking about a normal hydroponic grow system. It could be a DWC grow system in your greenhouses or in your net houses with a DWC grow table or a grow pond. That could be very cheap. You have to calculate the cost of the table, the hollow blocks, or the cemented pond which you're making, and then you just have to put in a sheet, a plastic sheet or a rubber sheet which doesn't allow the water to flow out or drainage, and that's it. You put your floats on that and start growing, but you should be having a pump, you should be having an air circulation, and you should be having, of course, a water chiller. So these are the few things which could enhance or help a starter to establish himself instead of getting into some sort of buying some high hardware and then struggling with all the software that is being supplied. So sorry for that. I don't know exactly the numbers.
It's perfectly all right, sir. So, sir, as you have told that hydroponics needs a huge investment. So, what would you recommend to our participants, that they should go for a training and then start their hydroponic farm, or they should hire a consultant for that, so that the rate of success are more? So, what would you suggest?
Yeah, sure. See, if he is from an agriculture background, he's having a knowledge of agriculture and farming, and he has studied all the subjects which I was mentioning, then he needs to have some sort of training or some sort of practical knowledge he has to gain. He has to keep his books aside. He has to get into the field and start getting his hands dirty, rather his hands wet. Now, because we're talking about hydroponics, he has to get his hands wet to understand exactly how the system works. It is the basic information that is being learned has to be translated into this controlled environment agriculture, number one. Number two, if he is trying to, sorry to say to the other consultants, even though I'm one, the consultant should be having very good knowledge, practical knowledge of his previous experience of growing crops in hydroponics. He cannot be of crops which has grown in field, or he could not be a consultant who has grown crops in greenhouses also, but he should be having a good knowledge of crops that is being grown in directly hydroponics. Then you can take the advice of the consultant and basically it's very advisable to have some sort of a mentor to understand exactly how things have to be taken up in a small pilot project. First, make a pilot project, understand the integrities of it, understand the errors, you make errors, you learn from errors, you get strong.
Thank you, sir. Sir, as you have mentioned that hydroponics comes under urban agriculture. So according to you, is there any scope of hydroponics in the rural areas, or should the farmers from rural area go for hydroponics, or they should stick to the soil-based traditional farming system?
See, the idea is, for basically it's urban ag. Okay, when you're talking about rural agriculture, the farmer has to unlearn a few things. I always keep telling this. He has to unlearn. He has to get out of his well of growing in the field. Of course, he has been doing a very good job, and let's not call him a farmer. He's a grower. So he has been growing crops. So he knows everything A to Z more better than any of the consultants. Okay, but he should be able to translate that into a scientific method. So he could complement his farm with a little area, maybe 100 square meters or 50 square meters of area to grow hydroponically grown vegetables, exotics. So he understands exactly, so it supplements his income. He could be growing his traditional crops. He could be growing some sort of high-end vegetables if he has the accessibility to sell in the market and his logistics are good. And that would be a very good suggestion because he knows the crop. Only thing is that the media has changed now. So it's always advisable for a rural farmer to have a small area, maybe in his pump room, maybe in his house, whereby he could put up some sort of growing system, or it could be even in his greenhouse, whereby he could use coco peat as a grow media. Not necessarily it should be NFT. He could use coco peat as a grow media. So he will understand exactly the difference between using coco peat and soil, because he will not be having any sort of soil infestation, soil-borne diseases coming to him.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you so much, sir. There is a question that you have said that crops which are grown in hydroponics, they are more healthy and more nutritious than the crops which are grown with the traditional soil-based farming method. So how the ratio of how much nutritious they are from the others, and what about the status of insect pest and diseases attacks in hydroponics as compared to the traditional soil-based farming methods?
See, let me take your last question first. The infestation of pest and disease is always there in any sort of controlled environment agriculture. No greenhouse can tell you, let me be very frank, no, the greenhouse growers tell you, yeah, this is pesticide free, I have not used any chemicals. But there is always the incidence of pests and disease in the greenhouse because it is completely controlled. So the scouting is very important, the sanitation is very important, and your process flow should be very important. If you're not having those controls, then your greenhouse will be completely infested overnight. So it is there that the agronomist value comes in, because it has to implement procedures and protocols and SOPs to avoid all these types of infestation. When an infestation occurs, of course, there are methods of curing it, but it's always advisable to have the other parameters of control and, of course, a prophylactic spray depending upon the incidence of the pest or the disease to keep them under threshold. Number one. Then the previous question was, yes, like you were saying about nutrition value. Yes, you can say the nutrition value is better. There is a comparative study done by, it is still being done by the Manipal University of Higher Education here in Dubai campus. They have studied, they have done a sample analysis on limb spinach and kale and lettuce, 3 crops they have taken. They have taken the plant from soil grown, from organic fields, and also from the indoor vertical farms. The research is going on. First initial reports shows that the mineral content or the protein content, vitamin content, and calorie content is different in all these 3 types of cultivation, and the best results are being indicated. The research is not yet complete. I just wanted to have a proof because I have this question from many of the people. So we are still conducting this thing. I would like to put one point is that people are saying, you're using nutrients in hydroponics, synthetic chemical nutrients in hydroponics. But basically, I would like to put it in one word, like hydroponics is beyond organic. because you are not using any sort of excessive use of chemicals, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, or any sort of things. You are using very, very limited. You are always keeping all your heavy metals within control. You are keeping your pesticide residues, and we are sending the crop after cultivation. If you want to get your certified with Global Gap or HACCP, you have to send your crop for MRL test. That is a maximum residual limit test. So once it is tested as per the Codex standards of Europe, then you have your crop perfectly balanced, and you can have that whole sheet which shows your pesticide content is how much, heavy metal content is how much. So it is within the limits, then you are in the safest zone.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, here I personally want to ask you that you said that we apply nutrients in hydroponics as per the recommendation. So, what you know that there are there are two coins, there are two sides of every coin. So, if any farmer they apply nutrients in higher dose than recommended in hydroponics, so are there do you know about some studies which shows that accumulation of the residues of the nutrients or the heavy metal accumulation in the crops which are grown from the hydroponics? Are there some studies like this or not?
No, because hydroponics is being done by, sorry to say, by the people who know the land, who know about farming, who know about it. They are literate guys. So they are not applying blindly the fertilizers. They are being given a specific, they make a specific recipe for the crop for every stage of the crop. So if there is a heavy metal residue in the crop, in the media, what happens is, sometimes we do a plain water washing of the media. So we remove it. So whatever drainage comes out, the most important aspect, let me again tell you, I've got many things to tell, but the most important aspect is here, when you're putting in your fertilizer, okay, you check the pH, EC, water temperature, you check everything. But what happens is people miss what is coming out. They have to check the drainage. You have to check the drainage of your water that is coming out after irrigating your crop from the media. Check the pH and EC and everything. There you will have lots of EC fluctuations. So when you have your fluctuations EC, that means your fertigations are not being properly done. There is being excessive accumulation. So then you will have to revert back, because it is a place whereby you can easily handle. Okay, you stop giving fertigation, give plain water, reduce the EC, or bring back the pH to that particular level. Again, start your irrigation and fertigation system. So it has got that flexibility, but in soil you don't have that flexibility. So drainage, checking of drainage is very important. Of course, the soil, the plant takes up in, when you're talking of nitrogen, it takes up, it doesn't take up nitrogen in the form of, say, it doesn't take in the form of, okay, I'm taking this nitrogen from compost. So I will take compost nitrogen. The plant doesn't know that. The plant takes only nitrogen in the form of nitrates, right? Uptake is in the form of nitrates. The sources could be fertilizers, synthetic fertilizer. The source could be an organic manure. Source could be anything. So ultimately, the plant takes up in the ionic form. So you have to control your feed in such a way that there is no accumulation or deposition of any sort of heavy metals or any sort of nutrients, excess nutrients into the crop.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Our participants want to know that if there are any certificate courses, particularly on hydroponics, if they want to get some practical insights, then could you please suggest them?
There are many organizations that are conducting courses, certificate courses and all that. It is on an organization level. There is nothing like a national level. Of course, at the international level, you have got the University of Arizona in the US. They have got the CEA course, Controlled Environmental Agriculture, whereby there is an online course and also an in-house course. So that's the course which is quite helpful in understanding the complete detailed hydroponics. But in India, of course, there are lots of organizations that are conducting these courses on a one-day crash course or a two-day crash course. But I would like to say that please get your theoretical course done. Don't stick to videos and YouTubes. Get back to the farm, get back to the field. As an intern, work free of cost. Usually what happens is, people said, okay, I would like to join, how much will you pay? So I said first you learn the tricks of the trade, and then the person can start advising me. It is in that level, he will, because he has got a good background of knowledge, good theoretical knowledge, good information about all the subjects of agriculture. So when he gets into the system by growing himself, practical knowledge is very important. Without that, there is no scope. Let me tell you very frankly, there is no scope at all, not even in India, not even abroad. You have to have a practical approach. So for that, you have to have your universities or your colleges to have a separate section, a hydroponic section, whereby there is a field whereby you run hydroponic crops in that and understand, so that at least you have a little knowledge, and then you get into some sort of training courses which also has some sort of field exposure, and that will help you to understand better, and you can fit more better in your future career.
Yeah, sir, definitely. Sir, is there any difference between the prices of the crops which are produced by hydroponics than the crops which are produced by the traditional soil farming method, and as well as is there any difference between the shelf life of the crops or yield of the crops?
See, the price is very, very high for crops grown on hydroponics. You know why? Because you are growing high. You are growing high end produce. You are not going in for your your 𝑴𝑐𝑒𝐍𝑚 and 𝑵𝑗𝑛𝑑 in hydroponics. You're going for high end produce. When you're going into high end produce, which is being consumed by the HoReCa segment, hotels, restaurants, and caves, or 5-star restaurants, you will have a premium price because you're producing them hydroponically, no soil. You have got your certifications, no microbial infections, your water test report is there, your crop test report is there, plus you have got a proper branding. So that will fetch you a premium price because you are growing a rare produce, you are bringing a novelty crop. And when you're talking of what is the other part you asked, you told me about?
So is there any difference between the shelf life of the crops and the yield of the crops?
Yeah, yield is high in hydroponics because the number of plants per square meter is more. When you're talking of traditional farming and you're talking this, the number of plants per square meter is more. If you're talking flatbed, if you're talking of a vertical farm, it depends upon the layers. If you're having 10 layers, it is 10 times more. If you're having 5 layers, 5 times more. So per area, per square meter, number of plants per square meter is high. When you're talking of lettuce, for example, in an open field, it could be around 10 to 12 maximum per square meter. Okay, but we're talking of hydroponics, we are doing around, you can say, 24 plants per square meter, lettuces. And of course, the shelf life is better because you have something called a post-harvest treatment. When you're talking of high-end produce, you harvest the crop, go to your pack house, keep it for pre-cooling, and then you have your freezer, chiller. Apart from that, you have got your nutritional values in the crop in such a way that you don't have high levels of nitrogen, whereby the leafy structure of the crop, the crispiness of the crop, fails immediately. What we usually do is, that's how the beauty of hydroponics lies is, we have to increase some elements, for example, calcium, magnesium, to give it that sort of crispiness. You may increase some sort of the EC levels to give some sort of Brix value. They talk of Brix value for cherry tomatoes or for melons. When you're increasing the Brix value 10 days prior to harvest, you're increasing the EC, a little of EC, okay, and that increases the Brix value, that increases the crispiness, that increases the, say, for example, you can increase the folic acid content of spinach, you can increase the calcium content of spinach. This is also being under research, whereby you can, grow the crop to feed, expectant mothers or lactating mothers, so that you have your calcium and folic acid into it, and that helps in proper nutrition and all that. So these are the places where research is still going on.
Okay, sir. Now we are done with the questions, and it was indeed a very, very informative session. Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Once again, thank you, sir, for such an enlightening session and your valuable time. I hope all the participants have gained a lot of knowledge from you. Thank you, sir. And so now I want to thank all the participants for your valuable time and patient listening. This training is being organized by the partnership of Just Agriculture and Agro-Environmental Education and Farmers Welfare Society, Punjab, with 𝑛AHEP 𝑚PUAT Udaipur, Maharana Pratap Horticulture University, Karnal, Vidhan Chandra Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, West Bengal, Shulini University, Solan, �ⵓ𝑡ْكَرْ KV, and Jagannath University. We are very grateful to all our co-organizers and the knowledge partners. Last but not the least, I would like to thank and congratulate Mr. DPS Badwal, Organizing Director of this training program, Mr. Mohit Bharadwaj, Course Director of this training program, members of the organizing committee, all the speakers and attendees of this session. And yeah, I hope all of you are aware that today we have another session also from 2 p.m. onwards. So I request you all to kindly join that session and make your Sunday more productive. See you all there. So as for now, thank you all for joining and have a lovely day.